Stay connected to the world with Channels TV Podcast and get all the trending stories. Simply log on to channelstv.com, click on podcast, select the program of your choice, and listen. Our podcast is available on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Tap the expertise you trust. Touch the stories that touch you. Anytime, anywhere.
Hello and welcome to Sunrise. I'm Ayo Makinde. Well, today is August 5. It's a new month altogether, and you're most welcome into it. So how is the economy treating you here in Nigeria? Wherever you are in the world, whichever part of the world you are, I understand the economic crunch is a global phenomenon of sorts. Well, hey, everyone's got to do what they have to do, right? So do your bit. And when it comes to talking about doing your bit, I mean, a good number of us, here in Lagos in particular, complain about the road work going on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, particularly the little portions that are left in Ibadan and on the Ibadan and the Lagos ends. I don't know how far it is in Ibadan yet, so you may want to give us an idea of what's happening in at your end. Or, can send us a message on Thread on Channels TV handle, and of course on Twitter, Channels TV, Sunrise CTV. You can let us know. In Lagos here, going in or out of Lagos, it still remains quite a task, particularly at the Berger bus stop end. Outward Lagos and inward Lagos, the challenge has always been that of the commercial bus drivers in particular. It is also worthy of note that, traffic managers, road safety corps, LASMA, they do their bit to ensure that these vehicles do not stop on the way. Can we also call out the unions themselves, particularly the park managers? I understand that the Lagos state government at some point, recognized a particular individual who is their chairman, to ensure that they do the needful. On the inward Lagos part, of course, granted that the roads, the parks are not actively in use now. But outward Lagos, they literally park on the roads. Like the bus stop is there, the bus stop is active, the bus stop is open, mostly free, but the commercial bus drivers stop on the roads. Now, I know that there is an official of the Lagos state government watching this program right now, whichever one you are. Can you do us a favor, even if it's not your purview? People don't care what department is in charge of what. Even if you work in the Ministry of Health, can you call someone in the Ministry of Transport and let them know that they need to speak with whoever is in charge of the parks? It would seem like the road safety managers, the traffic management agency, LASMA, is unable to control these guys and make sure that they stay within the parks. Can someone call whoever is in charge of the parks? I'm not talking about, the parks and gardens, last park or whatever it is. I'm talking about the bus stops. Can someone get them off the roads? Because the road sandwiches from 4 lanes into 2, can I say officially? But when you get closer to the bus stop, which is to the pedestrian bridge, it gets narrower into one by the buses that park on the roads, picking passengers, sometimes just standing there with no mind of picking passengers at all. So can someone please clear the roads? Lagos does not have to have on its insignia the identity of the city that's always slow due to go-slow or roadblocks. I'm still talking about Lagos, and I know that this also applies, I mean, both issues that I'm mentioning now applies to virtually every part of Nigeria where we have densely populated communities. I don't know what update there is about the Olusosun incinerator, you know, the refuse dump there. Is someone mindful of the health hazards? Is someone mindful that there are children in that environment, that there are newborn babies in that environment, particularly Olusosun? Do you ply that road between 7-Up bus stop and across Ojota Bridge? It smells quite far as Alakwere. I mean, for those who know this environment that we're talking about. And it's still the rainy season. Can someone please do something? Communicate with the people, at least let the people know that you're doing something about it. And talking about, you know, roads, the rains haven't gone, have they? And I don't know, I just feel this morning like putting out word to someone, clear the drainages around your house. You have councillors who live next door to you, expectedly. You have local government chairmen who expectedly live within the confines of the areas that they govern. Can someone call out these people and tell them that the drainages need to be cleared? Because if we do not do what is needful now, the floods are good, the rains are going to come, the drainages, if blocked, will ensure that there is flooding and there will be massive loss of lives and property. Can we do something about these things? I don't think we need to be told the things that we need to do. We signed up for the jobs. Can we get them done? Because lives and livelihoods of individuals are involved, be it at the marketplaces or at, you know, in the residential areas. We all have our jobs cut out for us. Can we do the needful? Okay, because some people are doing the needful right now, I think in Australia, playing for Nigeria. Yes, you got it right. The Falcons, the Super Falcons. Done us proud so far. Massive ways of celebration, and, you know, I can't get over the fact that for the first time in a while, not one single loss during the preliminaries, and that is massive. I think it was 2 weeks ago we showed you how they entered into, you know, the playing arena one day just with gratitude to God in their hearts. And I could see, I don't know if you could, if you saw the video, I don't know if you could see the bound, the camaraderie, the friendship, the bond among these ladies. Say a prayer for them and just wish them well. It is also very pleasurable to find out that from what we understand, they are going to be paid directly by passing certain things that used to cause some form of hiccups in the way of them getting their money. That is very sad and painful that we have authorities in the country who do not do the needful, and who would have to take an international organization to tell us that, look, if you don't know how to treat your own people, we will treat your own people better than you have been treating them. That's an indictment. I don't know how you feel about it. I feel very bad thinking about that. But today is not just about that. It's about us celebrating the fact that these ladies have been doing wonderfully well, doing Nigeria proud. So they are abroad doing that, as are many Nigerians in various parts of the world doing Nigeria proud. But if you are in Nigeria, can you do your bit as well? Please, don't get me started on what has Nigeria done for you. For one thing, Nigeria gave you an identity. You're a Nigerian. And it's very interesting that we say to ourselves, what has Nigeria done for me? We are very proud of Nigeria. I am a very proud Nigerian. Outside Nigeria, you're very, very proud of Nigeria. You're proud to say you're a Nigerian. But then what do you say about your country? Oh, like the leaders are this, oh, the leaders are that. But we have a system. We have systems to ensure that the rightful things are done. Start from the local government. Start from your councillor. Call them out. We don't need to have any unrest or civil unrest to ensure that people do what they're supposed to do. I mean, you want to ensure that things are done right in your locality, and you are going as far as the federal government. Yes, they got their work cut out for them. How about your councillor? How about your local government chairman? How about that commissioner who lives next door? How about that head of an agency who lives across the street from your house or the next street? Call all these people out. They signed up to do the job. Let them do their jobs, okay? I'm here doing my job. And part of my job this morning is to show you the lineup, what we have lined up for you this morning. We're going to begin with the conversation of what is happening in Niger right now. Maintaining peace in the ECOWAS region is the number one issue we'll be looking at this morning. Perspectives that a number of people need to get about it. And then there's the recent arbitration reforms. What does that mean? What are the conversations around that one? We'll be getting some insight about that. Then ensuring inclusive governance. Has there been a missed opportunity? Talk about this in the course of the week, or was it even last week? We'll talk about it again this morning. Have we missed an opportunity, or is there still any iota of redemption possible? Then we'll continue this series on lifestyle, self-healing habits and practices. We have someone who is going to talk from another perspective about that one today. And then our artist of the week. We couldn't have it last week. Most certainly today, God willing, we're going to have the artist of the week. Please keep your face here on the tube. And that's our lineup for this morning. But right after now, it'll be time for us to take the issues as the council do. Stay with us.
We no know waiting kill him, Papa. That same thing go kill him, oh. Hey. Niger Coup. You are welcome to the next level. When I look up, now commotion. When I look down, now frustration. When I look my side, now poto. Now so poto. To reach the top, now connection. If you look at person, now stagnation. When I look my side, now poto. Now so poto. Okay. One day, our Niger Coup. Now so then they talk. One day, our mumu go do. Now so we talk. This country take our hand. Rise up and take it command. We they see them, we know they blind. Oh. We must fight for our right. Oh. Anyhow, mambo die you. This next level. Now hot water. Bubble up. Then just they do us, yeah. See them with their big belly. Then go they use religion to cause plenty confusion. Sometimes the tribalism, poverty and nepotism. When hunger fire person, you go weak, you no go fit talk again. Today, I say, breeze go blow, fire nyash go open it, masquerade the face go show. Hey, today, I say, para walk go no, say the owner there for house, bad leaders them go. When I look up, now commotion. When I look down, now frustration. When I look at my side,
Thank you so much for staying with us. The West African sub-region is a focal point of old and new forms of armed conflict, violent extremism, organized crime, piracy, unrest due to social inequality, land use conflicts, election-related offenses, you name it. But in recent time, the Sahel region in West Africa particularly has been plagued by recurring military coups and political instability. I saw a map. I don't know how many of you saw that map. It would seem like the belt right above Nigeria, all the countries are now being led by, have gone through one military coup or the other. And this has posed significant challenges to regional development and democratic governance. So in response to this alarming trend, ECOWAS has emerged as a key actor in the battle against military coups in the Sahel. This issue is so concerning that, of course, we all know the president, along with other, in his capacity as chairman of ECOWAS, along with other leaders in the region, have been calling for one intervention or the other. What is important is to maintain peace in the ECOWAS region. So the one key factor that member states have mechanized for settling disputes peacefully is what has already been instituted. Liberia and Sierra Leone's wars threatened to engulf other countries in the region, and ECOWAS used some settlement mechanisms, such as military troops and all, to supervise ceasefire brokered by the then Ghanaian President Jerry Rawlings. Let's have conversations this morning with Dr. Adeoye Akinola, who is Head Research and Teaching and Head of Unit African Union Studies, Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation in South Africa. He joins us this morning along with Oyewole Ogini, who is a researcher and analyst, Armed Conflicts, Peace and Security, Africa, Bonn International Conflict Center in Germany. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Truly appreciate your time. Let me begin with you, Dr. Akinola. Yesterday when we, yesterweek when we, it was earlier this week when we started conversations around this, one of the questions we were asking is whether, our guest at the time thought that this whole unrest in Niger was coming as a surprise. To you, Dr. Akinola, does it come to you as a surprise?
Well, thank you so much, and good morning in Nigeria from Johannesburg. Frankly, without actually mincing words, it is not a surprise. The only surprise is that it's even been delayed. It's coming at a particular point in time where the entire Sahel region have been overridden by one conflict or the other. Students and policy analysts and researchers on security conflict will tell you the spillover effect of one conflict spilling to another country or another region. Once we have those waves of coup in the Sahel from one country to another, we know and we have been raising alarms that there's every possibility that the neighboring countries will soon be overrun by different kinds of military coups. And that's why the one in Niger is not a surprise. It should have even come earlier. That's what is surprising. And other sub-regional countries in that western part of Sahel should also be worried. Even if they still have a civilian government in power, they shouldn't sleep with their eyes closed because at any point in time, the military may seize power.
Well, Mr. Ogini, how about you? Yeah. Did you expect that this was going to happen? There are those who are wondering, this wasn't supposed to happen, at least not at the level. Do you agree with Dr. Akinola?
I agree to some extent, but maybe a little addition to what he said, because, Niger is a very strategic country in Sahel, which most international actors have been supporting, for instance, the United States, military bases there. France has been up and doing. Germany is providing military support and democratic building in the past year. So I foresee that this could have strengthened the institution and reduced this tendency of coup. So it's not really surprising, but I feel like that shouldn't have happened. Yeah.
Well, still with you, Mr. Ogini, how far back do the mechanisms for peace in ECOWAS goes? There are those who will refer to the ECOWAS agreement updated in 1993 that includes principles previously absent, in the earlier pacts: solidarity and collective self-reliance, non-aggression between member states and the rest of them. But what is important here is exactly what is the origin of this series of coups, particularly the one in Niger being right above the north of Nigeria.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting conversation. If you look at ECOWAS, ECOWAS was formed basically for economic interest, and it transformed much more later, to encompass governance and security. And I could remember vividly, maybe in the last decade, ECOWAS is commended for this sort of gentleman agreement of two-term, but this gradually escalated. Maybe I could say it decreased in terms of how institutions, capture this aspect of free and fair election, and this also affects, for instance, how ECOWAS take action on if a president or a leader want to extend his tenure, what action ECOWAS take at that time, if it is affirmative, if it's pragmatic, or it's just more or less partnership. So this has effect on how this, grow to a greater extent. So with respect to Niger, as you know, Niger has had successful folk coup in the past, and the current president that was, head hostage. I mean, if you look at the situation with him, even before the inauguration, over 24 or 28 hours, it was there was an attempted coup d'etat. So this is an indication, that the conflict, Niger in particular, from the Mali side, from Burkina Faso side, from the Algeria side, and now from Nigeria side. So Niger has a series of external challenges at its border, and now within its border, there are also internal struggles. It's not just only this struggle enable military to gain more power, and then there is increase in militarization, which gives military a kind of strength, and then democratic institution is always played down in this case. So it's very easy for coup to take place.
Well,
Nigeria without exception.
Very, very. Anyway, let me ask you, Dr. Akinola. Looking at that, the map of Africa now. I mean, I'm sure you have seen that map that is going around now. And on the left and on the right side of Niger, and all across the belt, from one end of Africa to the other, along the same line as Niger, every country there, is now occupied by one military junta or the other. So there are those who are wondering whether or not there's not some chess player, at work. What do you think?
Thank you so much. I think we have to take a step back and look at the what I call the destabilization of Libya and the proliferation of not just arms and ammunition downward, but also the proliferations of fighters that have lost out in Libya coming into the Sahel. So we know that the entire Sahel region, from even the West up to the East, have been destabilized. And when you have insecurity, there cannot be development. We know the two of them are intertwined. So is that one is dependent on the other. In an environment of conflict, it's exceedingly difficult to have development. It's exceedingly difficult to have what they term as good governance because of the vulnerability and the militarization of the society. So it is not just about what is actually happening within the Sahel. These are also related to what is happening outside of the Sahel, and particularly at this point in time with the Russia-Ukraine war and this possibility or this maybe pessimism that the Cold War politics will be enacted once again and being played out in Africa, where we have the Western powers and the Eastern, I call them Eastern powers, including Russia, China, trying to balance their hegemony claim on Africa. So the conflict goes beyond that. We have seen the Wagner group being sponsored by Russia, particularly jubilating and even trying to frame the coup as an anti-colonial, as anti-colonialism, and trying to say we can offer our support. So there are all kinds of external play. We also know in the Sahel, Mali, all the countries that have military regimes are trying to chase out the West, France and Western powers from their territorial integrity, and that's why France have moved into Niger. So if Niger also successfully chased out France and the West, then we have that region possibly moving closer to the West, closer to countries like Russia, like China, and this is particularly worrying for counter-terrorism in West Africa and the Sahel.
Dr. Akinola, doesn't that in a way indict the African Union or the heads of state of these nations? You are not unaware that there's been more than one Russia-Africa summit, Russia-Germany summit, America-Africa summit, Russia-Africa summit, Germany-Africa summit, US Africa Summit, UK Africa Summit, all of them pretty much paying attention to the continent of Africa. Now, it would seem like it's even more difficult for African leaders themselves to come together and agree on a thing or two. So isn't that an indictment on its own where African leaders, whether military or civilian, have to look outside of their continent as opposed to stay within their continent and champion the cause of the continent?
Thank you. And that's the issues many of us have raised at the continental level within the space that civil society organizations have been given to operate. This has been exceedingly different from the Organization of African Unity that tried to mobilize members to have this non-aligned movement. You remember during the Cold War, as much as the West and Soviet Union at that time tried to polarize Africa, Africa were able to stand in unity to say we are not joining any of the polars, not any of the Western or Eastern Bloc. But that's not what we have under the African Union Peace and Security Architecture developmental templates, whereby the African Union believes, maybe under this ideology of African Renaissance, that they could develop and secure Africa by partnering with global powers. You know that the fund for the African Peace and Security Architecture is being how do I say, it's being sponsored by the European Union in the first instance. So that shows how dependent the African Union has been on Western powers. But you may not also blame the African Union because some of the times the member states also consistently refuse to pay their annual dues to the African Union. So where will they get the required resources to secure Africa? So there are all kinds of complexity, and Africa is presently divided because it looks as if the West has failed many African states, and they are turning to Russia, they are turning to China. Democracy, the particularly representative democracy, seems to have failed many of the African countries. So Why would they still stick to the West? And that's why you are saying in the Sahel that they are trying to turn away from the West to Russia, to China, to Turkey, and other countries. And it seems African Union are particularly somehow powerless in stopping these waves and romance towards Russia and other countries because they are also romancing with some of those countries.
Well, Mr. Bayo Oluwake has since joined this conversation this morning. He is a global affairs analyst. He's also director and principal research fellow at the African Resource Development Center. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Oluwake. We're trying to get a background, first of all, into this conversation about how we got here. And the two guests, Dr. Akinola and Mr. Ogini, been trying to look at the background in perspective of how Western powers and European powers have attempted over the years to pretty much hold on to the reins of influence on Africa or these African countries, as opposed to the African countries themselves owning themselves and releasing themselves from these clutches. What's your take on that one and its influence or impact in the unrest in the Sahel?
That's a double-barrel question, but thank you for having me, and good morning to the viewers and other panelists. I hold a slightly different view, and my view is that depending on what is at stake, you may have a unanimity of interests. And I can easily give you an example with the peace and security architecture. Now, the orientation of the African Union and for African integration that is being implemented at the moment is founded specifically on what we call the regional economic communities. So in West Africa, you have ECOWAS. In East Africa, you have the East African Community. You have SADC, Southern African Development Community in Southern Africa, and so on. And it is a regional economic blocks that are supposed to work more for integration of their sub-regions, and then we will collapse backwards into the AU at some future date. The AU currently only acts as an overarching, guiding mechanism. And that's why you find, for example, that in conflict resolution, based on the success of the ECOMOG model in the 90s, regional standby brigades were adopted. And so the regional bodies are expected to deal with these issues of breakdown of maybe democratic rule, or other terrorism and other things. And that's why you find that this is exactly what has been happening. So I would say that it is not exactly the AU, although the AU is supposed to provide guidance and that overarching supervision in quotes, if you like. And secondly, if you look at what has been done in the past, take ECOWAS, for instance. ECOWAS has been able to actually intervene in many countries successfully. In addition to Liberia and Sierra Leone in the 90s, we had Cote d'Ivoire when President Laurent Gbagbo lost an election and refused to leave. ECOWAS deployed what is called ECOMISI, and they were able to reinstate Mr. Alassane Ouattara, who won. I don't want to take too much time. Guinea-Bissau was another example. Gambia is another example. And I do not think that Western powers influenced ECOWAS into that. This has been part of what ECOWAS itself adopted as a means of ensuring that the continent, based on the AU's own position, that the continent should be more democratic. So I just thought that we need to keep that in perspective. Now, that doesn't mean that foreign interests don't get involved in African affairs. Of course they do. But all I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't put everything at the doorstep of foreign interference, or to suggest that Africans have been unable to take decisions. There are 54 countries on the continent, and out of these 54 countries, a majority of them, are not usually led one way or the other by foreign powers. Now, I think as well that we got where we are now, and I will summarize because of time, simply for three reasons in my view, and these are not exhaustive. Number one, we had the coronavirus pandemic, which devastated the global economy and also especially impacted the economy of developing countries. Secondly, we had the security vacuum in Libya, and I've said this elsewhere, when the North Atlantic Treaty Organization intervened to remove Colonel Gaddafi. Incidentally, the African leaders were about solving that problem. But from what we have heard President Museveni say, they were prevented from doing that by NATO, which went ahead to remove Gaddafi. And the security vacuum created there led to Tuareg fighters who had been integrated into the Libyan army to move across the desert back to Mali, declare the Republic of Azawad, and create a significant destabilizing factor in the Sahel. Now, African countries mobilized to support the regime of Captain Sanogo to confront that. And the Tuaregs gave up fighting. Many of them gave up, but the jihadi insurgents filled that space, and then we have the problem we have today. So I think that it's maybe 50-50. We've had the AU or ECOWAS doing what it should do, although in the case of Niger, I am one of those who do not support the military intervention. I think it is going to be extremely counterproductive. But nonetheless, I think this is, what has gotten us to where we are. Perhaps with the exception of Guinea, where President Alpha Conde, gave himself the third term, and the military overthrew him. So roughly, I think this is the scenario and how we got to where we are now.
Let's talk about, how this concerns Nigeria directly or indirectly. We are not unaware, let me begin with you, Dr. Akinola. We're not unaware of the response of Nigeria so far in what is happening in the region in a good number of ways. Quick back up to one of the conversations had in Abuja about this issue, where one of the leaders of Africa, I think, was talking about the influence or impact of governance, or a lack of it, the impact of governance on the people, or a lack of governance on the people, which could be responsible for these things. The leader was pretty much saying his fellow leaders were playing the giraffe and the issues that are going on. How significant, Dr. Akinola, is governance in the unrest that we are witnessing in the sub-region right now?
Thank you. And that was the point I earlier made, that there is a convergence or maybe a strong nexus between development, insecurity, and governance. All of these are interlinked together. And I've said it that when you have poverty, particularly as we have seen in the Sahel, in Niger, for instance, almost 46% of Nigerians lived on less than $1 per day. And this is a country that is rich in uranium. I do not want to speak about Nigeria because it is obvious our poverty is exceedingly endemic. So it's not just about Nigeria, not about Niger, across the Sahel country. And when you have poverty and people are actually fighting against the war of the belly because of poverty, food insecurity, climate change that has driven people from being economically productive, then those people, particularly an environment where you have high population of the youth that are restless, that are unemployed, that are hopeless, then insecurity will actually permeate such society, because you have some mischievous warlords that will be able to easily mobilize people to support whatever agenda they have. So at the heart of this crisis is the issue of misgovernance, or what we can call ineffective governance or poor governance. Of course, we can speak about global influence in the Sahel, what have we, but we also have to recognize the fact that despite the AIDS that is tripping into the Sahel, a country like Niger particularly rely on donor organization for survival. But despite these billions coming into the space, the average man on the street is still particularly poor. And when you have that, they have been under civilian administration for years and they did not fare better. So for them, it's not about the system of government, it is about improvement in their own economic situation. That's why we have seen celebrations across the Sahel welcoming military coup. So issue of governance underdevelopment, or you can call it undevelopment, is particularly part of the motivation that emboldens the military to take power because they know that they might be legitimate.
Mr. Ogini, on the same question, but take the perspective of the young people, the population of youths in the Sahel, more specifically Niger, whether or not government has done anything significant or at all to buy their confidence enough to support whatever initiatives they are coming up with. Youth engagement, how severe is it in this whole melee?
Thank you very much. I think, yeah, with respect to youth, I don't want to just isolate it. I first want to speak to what Akinola said. Niger has not experienced democratic transition successfully in the past years. So, I want us to know that Niger is a very strategic country when it comes to migration of Africa to Libya. Very strategic. And that's one of the reasons why international community have been very supportive in order to help people not to go through that route. That's the first thing. And young people are particularly are the people who move from this route to Libya now. So this is one point I want to make. The second point I want to make is the current president, which is head hostage. You know that is from minority group and an Arab. So, and before the election, you definitely know this ethnicity play a very key role into the election and still continue to generate a reaction from different ethnic groups. Third, you know that there's a Traore which has been fighting for autonomy, political autonomy since 1990, between 1991 and 1997. And this group posed a very serious security challenge in the northwestern region of Niger. So the third aspect is the resources, how the youth also are able to benefit from the resources that the state has. So these all together play a very important role on how this happen. But I will say that even the effect of Nigeria effects on Niger Republic is quite enormous. When the first subsidy removal took place, there was a protest in the state capital. So a lot of things went up, and this also was fed directly by Nigerians. So this play out on how this supports to bringing the flag of Russia, and but I must say that it's not only Russia, because I was in the border in the past 3 days, Niger border. So I saw also young people flagging even France border, even within Nigeria. So it depends on which way the media cover. So this dynamic is how the youth reflect on their future. So I think it's important to reflect that in this the whole evolution of crisis in Nigeria.
Mr. Oluwake, speak to this particular question, but from the perspective of the dramatis personae in governments, the politicians, policymakers, policy executors, and all of that. We saw a video, rightly or wrongly, saying that a particular government official was dragged in his own community in that same country, Niger. So speak to us on what you think has been the role, rightly or wrongly, of politicians in the belt, that is right now being occupied by military leaders all across the Sahel, the way we have it. What was left undone? And then we can now go to the international dimension, the diplomatic dimensions. But first of all, within these localities, how have we fared as Africans, particularly as leaders in those governments?
Thank you. I think, first of all, I agree with all the points made by other two speakers on the effects of poor governance. To your question specifically, if we go back in history, we would see that these countries, what we call this now being referred to as the belt, the Sahelian belt, so to speak, Virtually all of them are either almost entirely covered by the desert, or they are significantly exposed to what you might call today global warming, climatic changes, extremely adverse climatic changes. Niger is 80% desert. Mali is 65% desert. The entire northern Burkina Faso in the dry season is very, very dry, but in the rainy season, it gets some light. So that also imposes challenges economically on those countries. Added to that is the fact that the political elite of Francophone countries are quite different from the political elite of the Anglophone countries in one respect, which was that the French colonial policy, which every secondary school person in Nigeria who does government is taught, the policy of assimilation, where once you were a graduate, you were assimilated into French culture, you got a French passport. So you had all this first generation of leaders in Francophone Africa being French citizens, and therefore they could not oppose France. And you know all the other economic impediments that France imposed on them, including holding their foreign reserves, which of necessity must be in French banks. So all of this would, for you, produce a political elite that would significantly be focused on France. You know, colonialism itself was very long. So it's, even if you're not focused on your metropolitan colonizing power, it will still take you several decades to break yourself free from that.
Oh, pardon me, Mr. Luake, if I can butt in. Something you said earlier lines up in a way with what you just said now about, the role that the politicians have played so far. You talked about the expanse of desert lands in these areas. How much different are they from Dubai? You know the progress that Dubai has made over the past few decades, even in the 80s. For God's sake, what was Dubai like compared to what it is now? Or what it was even like 10, 15, 20 years ago, when the revolution of the entire nation had begun really, really vast. So one wonders, with all of the richness that Niger and other countries have under their lands, how difficult would it have been for them to foresee the challenges of desertification that you are saying and get ahead of it?
I just said that the orientation of the leadership. You had a leadership which has been prepared, believing they were French citizens. Look, the current president of Guinea, Colonel Doumbouya, is a French citizen. He's a colonel in the Guinean army, but he's also a French citizen. He was in the French Legionnaires, even though he staged a coup to remove President Alpha Condé. Okay? So the orientation is important. Secondly, I don't think, and I'm not defending bad governance, but I don't think these countries are as economically endowed as Dubai. But that is not an excuse. I'm just trying to say that the orientation is important. If you look at Ghana, Nigeria, and so, our leaders challenged the British. Only Sekou Touré of Guinea challenged the French, challenged President de Gaulle. So you cannot rule that out. Now, if we are now having a situation in which, because of poor governance, effect of COVID, security vacuum in Libya, which makes weapons and everything available, even to extra non-state actors, so to speak, it's going to make governance extremely difficult, and especially democratic governance. Okay. Because in democratic governance, you give everyone a chance. So I think that why not excusing the coups? There are so many factors that have played into the situation in which we have, and clearly there is the resource dimension. Okay. And it's not only France. All countries of the world are interested in resources in Africa. Okay. So the African elite, I think, has not been able to navigate or develop a policy that will see them successfully navigating all these contentions that come from extra-continental powers.
All right, gentlemen, let's talk about the diplomatic intervention so far and your confidence. Mr. Luake, I'll begin with you. So far you've seen, the Nigeria's intervention, the comments that have been made, diplomatic trips that have been made already, and the position of ECOWAS, or the options that are on the table. What are your thoughts about those steps that have been taken. There are those who are wondering, should we even be considering military action at this time? But then there are those who are wondering whether or not we've even explored at all, much less enough, diplomatic interventions. Mr. Lowake, let's begin with you.
Thank you, and I'll try to be brief. In diplomacy, first of all, you will not give a deadline, even if you have a deadline in mind. If you take the NATO-Russia problem over Ukraine, the Russians are simply told, withdraw to the 2014 borders. NATO hasn't told Russia, you must withdraw by this date. Because when you give a specific deadline, you must have the resources to effect compliance. You must have really looked at all of that. And I think you must also have engaged with the other party, okay, had their side, and then arrive at your, measures and the deadline. So I think that maybe ECOWAS was hasty in imposing a deadline. Secondly, if there will be the deployment of military power, and I need to clarify this, and I'm not speaking for ECOWAS, but from reality and practice, deployment of military power does not necessarily mean you are going to start shooting. There's what you call psychological pressure. You can deploy your military around the area, to be like what was done to President Jammeh when he refused to hand over power. Not a single shot was fired, but forces were deployed, and there were maneuvers all around the place, But in the case of Niger, if we did that, it could escalate because the two sides are already taking hardline positions. Thirdly, and for me this is very critical, Nigeria may have to spearhead any kind of non-diplomatic, or anyway, it's diplomatic because even when you use the military, it is a continuation of policy by other means. But Nigeria may have to spearhead that. We are not in a position to do that. Niger, number one, has supported Nigeria during situations in the UN and the AU where we needed their vote. Niger has been a strong ally to fight Boko Haram. Niger is a buffer zone for Nigeria against jihadi insurgents from the northwest in Mali. Niger is a buffer zone for Nigeria against a collapsed Libya, reducing the effect of these two critical countries on our own security. Deploying the military into Niger, in my honest and humble opinion, may complicate the security situation, and I personally do not support it.
Thank you. Ms. Ogini?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I go in line with what Adebayo said, but maybe I will add to this that, Niger to Nigeria, even during the civil war, Niger president actually contributed to the negotiation. And in terms of resource sharing, as you can see now, we depend on Niger River for electricity. So they play a key role. And then when you now talk about people at the border communities, we have to reflect on how their life will look like. Currently, Nigeria has over 300,000 refugees in Niger. And that's very critical. We have to reflect on that. But on whether deadline or not deadline, I would say yes. There have been extended deadline over the years. With Mali, it has yielded no results. There have been extended deadline with Sudan for transition. It has yielded no result. And the same thing with Burkina Faso, it has yielded no result. So, given a deadline that is very short, I think is pragmatic. Yeah, however, on the aspect of military intervention, it has to be well thought out. I know Nigeria is currently engaging through ECOWAS, Libya, and Algeria in order to seek their opinion on this issue. So I'm sure that that will really matters a lot in terms of how the intervention could really be effective. So other than that, I will also say that when you look at the multinational joint task force, which has been fighting, insurgency in the last decade, Niger holds this the fourth sectoral region, which is a key region, for multinational task force. And I think the relationship between this military, the Lake Chad Basin Commission, the existence of it in terms of the military cooperation will be affected, and we have to reflect on this.
Same issue, but if you can pay a little more attention to how it'll affect the people whatever the diplomatic intervention is, Dr. Akinola, it has to consider how it'll affect the people. Add to that the fact that at least 4 countries border Niger Republic. So how do you think these interventions, these diplomatic interventions so far will affect the people or are affecting the people already?
Thank you. And maybe I must start by also saying that I don't know what ECOWAS I don't know the information they have on their table that will make them even give ultimatum in the first place. I know that sometimes maybe it is something like a deterrent. Maybe they want to go back to the ECOMOG days. I'm not sure if they have the capacity to do that. But if we look at Mali, when ECOWAS imposed sanctions on Mali, I'm talking of economic sanctions, it's not the military that will suffer. It is the average man on the streets that will suffer. It is businesses that will suffer because the military, I'm sure, before you plan a coup, you must have gauged the cons and the pros. And they know that if we were to move in and remove the democratically elected government, there will be sanctions, and they must have been prepared to that. So imposing sanctions that they can't travel ban, they don't even want to travel. So that's ineffective. So we know that when sanctions are imposed, ordinary citizens will suffer. But it's slightly different from military engagement now, and we have to possibly divide this into two. It is different when you are invading a country for whatever reason. You are declaring a war on a country. It's different from when you are declaring a war on a government that the region considers illegitimate or illegal. Maybe I should use illegal. So that is different. A declaration by ECOWAS of war against the military regime is not a declaration of war against Nigeria and against the country as a whole. There is still a legitimate government headed by someone that is still in Niger. And what ECOWAS says that restore the legitimate president to power. So when they declare war on the military regime, it's not necessarily a declaration of war on it. We saw that in Gambia, like my colleague have said. We also saw that in the case of Gbagbo. If the majority are in opposition to any government, when an external power moving to remove that government, that is not a declaration of war against the country as a whole. And one thing we have seen in Mali is that the same reason that the Malian military regime gave or overthrew the civilian regime, they are even worse off. There is more insecurity now in Mali. There's no any form of economic development in Mali under the military government, and maybe that's what ECOWAS are saying. But one thing I would want to say is that you start with soft power before you switch to hard power in diplomacy. ECOWAS have not done that. They ought to start with negotiating. If the military junta refuse to abdicate government, then they can now switch to, because we saw that with Gbagbo, they intervened, they sent presidents to Gbagbo, he refused to leave the office, then they move in, and in any case, how is this
don't you think that has happened, Dr. Akinola? I mean, I think that 2 delegations have already been sent to Niger.
No, that is not enough, because I know Abubakar that was sent did not even meet with the military head. I'm saying you have to exhaust every form of subtle diplomacy before you engage militarily. Because one thing I know, we don't want to be like NATO that will go into a country, remove the leader without any plan. If ECOWAS are to move into there, I'm not sure they have any plan. What if they remove it? So I'm just saying they ought to be more careful.
Okay. Well, let's close with this, gentlemen. 30 seconds each. Dr. Akinola, I'll start with you. How does this affect Nigeria directly? Niger is a major border country and it has quite a number of states. And you and I know the poverty level, multidimensional poverty level in the north, particularly in those states where that border Niger directly. What should be the concern for Nigeria now, particularly at those states level?
I think it is particularly concerning, and I think Nigeria should be very interested in the political stability of Niger, and they should be wary of the engagement of foreign mercenaries into that space. Nigeria should be there, because if you look at the border, it's very long with Niger, and we don't want mercenary, particularly Russian mercenary, moving in and out of Niger and Nigeria. This will complicate the fight against Boko Haram. And if you see displacement from Niger coming into Nigeria, that would be exceedingly, it will put more pressure on the economic prosperity of that part of Nigeria.
All right. Mr. Ogini?
Yeah, I think Nigeria has to think about its national interest, especially with the Northeast now. Some parts have been cleared. Some of the parts that have been occupied by Boko Haram have been cleared, and peace is restoring to some of these areas. And there are other areas that are also not yet clear. So, and this also still depends largely on the collaboration in that Lake Chad basin. So we have to reflect on that and see how we can keep the stability in that region.
Mr. Oluwake.
ECOWAS is on the right path, except for the haste to deploy military action. In Nigeria's interest will not be served. For example, one, if we take actions that directly impact negatively on us, and this has been said on this program, I don't want to repeat. Secondly, ECOWAS has to be very careful not to be perceived as an instrument of France or as an instrument of the Euro-Atlantic powers. The credibility of ECOWAS is important. And then three, Nigeria, like my other co-panelists said, Nigeria must factor in her own national interest in this matter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bayo Oluwake, Global Affairs Analyst, Director and Principal Research Fellow at the African Resource Development Center. Thank you so much. Along with Mr. Dr. Adeoye Akinola, who is Head Research and Teaching and Head of Unit, African Union Studies Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation, South Africa. We've also had Mr. Oyewole Ogini, Research and Analyst, Armed Conflicts, Peace and Security, Africa, Bonn International Conflict Center in Germany. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your thoughts and perspectives this morning.
Thank you.
All right. So that is that, and let's hope that everyone has gotten some understanding and hopefully some marching orders, if I dare say. We're back right after now to take on another conversation. Do stay with us.
Now, let me tell you about Safari Valley Eco Resort, the first of its kind in West Africa. Upon your arrival, you are introduced to your butler, who plans your itinerary.
We were surrounded by wildlife from the moment we entered the eco park.
So many activities, all in the same premises. Visit the gym or the stables. They have it all. At my break, I'm able to practice my putting.
We also went fishing on a man-made canal. Our tour guides taught us so much about the wildlife and how to interact with them.
They used only electric vehicles here. This creates a serene environment. I'm told it's over 1,000 acres. My cabin here sits on 2 acres with a large terrace space overlooking my private swimming pool. Now this is royalty. They have their own farms, thousands of fruit trees. I can also have my lunch here at the waterfall. Quite a beautiful place you have here.
Visit Safari Valley Eco Resort in Ghana, bringing you closer to nature.
The Duchess International Hospital caters to every aspect of the family's health needs. A one-stop shop for maternity and child health services, emergency medicine and critical care, medical and surgical subspecialties, dental and eye care, and a range of other subspecialties and services, all available at a single location right here in the heart of Ikeja. And it really doesn't matter if you're paying out of pocket using your HMO or private insurance. We focus completely on providing that world-class affordable healthcare for all the family at all times.
Wherever Wherever you go, Teramashe, whatever you do, Teramashe, yo, 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 your time done they gone. Yo, 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 your beats done they done. You think say God in order for your side, and you want to find another way to prosper. You think say God in order just get your time.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us, and that's what we're talking about next. May 2023, that's May this year, 26th day especially, former President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Arbitration and Mediation Bill, marking what experts say is the end of legislative process and the beginning of a new arbitration regime in Nigeria. Now, that act, the 2023 Arbitration and Mediation Act, offers a revamped and modern legal framework to entities seeking to arbitrate their commercial disputes in Nigeria. The act introduces several provisions that will be of interest to arbitration users in the country. Well, if you're wondering what this is all about, I'm just a journalist and a presenter. We have two guests here with us, both from the Nigerian Institute of Chartered Arbitrators. Shola Oshodi-John is the registrar. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you, sir.
As well as Francis Olege, who is a faculty member, Nigerian Institute of Chartered Arbitrators. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So let me begin with you. Ladies first, no offense.
Nice one.
Just to be clear, for those who are hearing about this, perhaps for the first time, what is this new Arbitration and Mediation Act? How is it different from the old?
Thank you very much for inviting us. The new act, the Arbitration and Mediation Act, that was acceded to by the President, former President Muhammadu Buhari, in May this year, is a game changer for us in arbitration. The new act it's been extensively reviewed, and it has now been brought in conformity with the UNCITRAL model on international law. And so we're very excited about it. There are a lot of new provisions that will make arbitration more user-friendly and will also assist us as arbitral institutions to do our work effectively. So one of the new provisions that I think is a game changer is the fact that now the default arbitrator is one, sole arbitrator. In the past, it used to be three. Whether it is 5,000 naira or 5 million naira or 5 billion. Once the parties do not say who the number of arbitrators they want, and they end up in court, the court will appoint three. So now the default position is one, which is in line with global practice. So if the parties have an invalid arbitration clause, or they fail to talk about it, the Arbitral Institute will appoint an arbitrator for them, and one. And so, like I said, the powers of the Arbitral Institute is very extensive. Now we can appoint. It doesn't matter whether we are mentioned as the appointing institution or authority or not. Once the parties come to us, the law, the new act gives us the power to appoint arbitrators on behalf of the parties.
Well, Ms. Olege, what changes are we to expect in the practice of arbitration and mediation? I mean, she's probably just mentioned one, but the question a number of people will ask, for instance, let me even, ask you this. There are those who would wonder what arbitration and mediation even means in the first place. Some are hearing all of these for the first time, and she's talking about 1 being appointed, 3 being appointed. Some are hearing this for the first time. What does it mean?
Yeah, arbitration is a process whereby parties appoint a third party neutral to give a final decision on the issues they present before him. So it's like he's doing what a judge would do. In the case of a judge, you call that a judgment, but in the case of an arbitrator, you call that an award. So the parties appoint the arbitrator or arbitrators, as the case may be, to evaluate their evidence, look at their documents, listen to parties, and then give a final decision that will be binding on the parties. But that means circumventing the courts, because, of course, we all know that going to courts in Nigeria, for instance, could take a very long time before the matter comes to a finality. And businessmen, commercial men, they don't have that time to waste, really. So because of that, they'll prefer, to refer their matters to a third-party neutral who could give a final decision. On the other hand, mediation is different. In mediation, parties want to negotiate. They do not want a binding decision. They want to resolve their issues by themselves. But for some reasons, they can't do that themselves, so they want to involve a third-party neutral who facilitates the negotiation. It doesn't decide for them. All the mediator does is to facilitate the negotiation between the parties. The negotiation belongs to the parties. The outcome eventually is the parties. It's an amicable settlement between the parties.
Okay.
That's the difference between mediation and arbitration.
Is that within business or between businesses?
It can be anything. Mediation, you can mediate any case that is not criminal. There's no criminal matter. There's no divorce. There's no related to dissolution of marriage. You can mediate virtually anything in Nigeria now.
I was going to say, do you also mediate marriage?
No, you cannot mediate. You can mediate a lot of things about marriage, but you cannot mediate dissolution of marriage. Yeah.
Interesting. So there's this vexed issue of making Nigeria attractive as a seat of arbitration. Mrs. Oshodi John, to what extent will this new act, the new law help in this regard? What else do you think can be done to achieve that?
Well, I believe that the new law will help. It will go a long way to make Nigeria a friendly country towards arbitration, and that more people would like to, come to Nigeria to resolve their dispute. Because, like I said earlier, the Act now is not fully in conformity with the UNCITRAL model law, as well as the New York Convention of 1958 that has to do with recognition and enforcement of awards. And then there are new provisions in the Act as well that I believe will also help. We'll talk about emergency arbitrator. If there are situations where there may be perishable goods involved and you need to take a decision immediately, the new Act provides for that. So you can appoint an arbitrator to ensure that the record is preserved within 3 days. But having said that, the Act itself will not do it. It definitely means that we, the practitioners, must do more, starting with the legal profession. We must embrace alternative dispute resolution and ensure that it works in the country. Moving on, the judiciary as well has a role to play. Because one of the major challenges we've had in the past is the fact that awards are being set aside by judges, because they have their own way of looking at it. Some people say it's an interference, and some of us will say it's an intervention. But we think that there must be a structure put in place where there's an award and there is a challenge to the award, it should be done between a certain number of time, a certain number of months or year. There must be provision. It should end the old style of taking arbitration from the first court, from court of first instance to the Supreme Court. It's a no-no, because at the end of the day, arbitration goes through the same process that litigation goes through, which is not meant to be. Arbitration is meant to be finality, that after there's an award, that is the end of the matter. And so where parties challenge it, we should come up with a provision or come up with a mechanism where after the Court of Appeal, the matter should come to an end. I know that the new act talks about the review panel. You know, there's now a panel, award review that can review a decision. But then the parties have to agree to go to the review panel to review their decision. If there's no agreement, and that's it, they can't go to the review panel. It's a good one, but we don't know how. We have to test the waters and see how it's going to work and how things are going to play out. And these are part of the things we're going to be talking about in our forthcoming annual conference, where we actually have a section targeted to the new Arbitration and Mediation Act. We want to see how do we leverage it? How do we ensure that we can actually bring in technology? Because the whole world is talking about technology now. We're going to be reviewing at our conference coming up in Abuja from the 16th to the 17th of November. And we hope that we will be able to do justice, not just to the Arbitration and Mediation Act that has been passed, but other issues that are pertinent to the development of arbitration in Nigeria, and not just only Nigeria, but Africa. Like we all know, that Nigeria is the center of Africa. And so if it works for us, it works for every other person. So the seat one will come. With the new act, we will see more people coming to Nigeria, but we in Nigeria has to be ready. We have to be prepared. Our courts needs to be ready to make sure that, you know, arbitration is seen to do what it ought to do. That is speedy resolution of dispute among parties.
Okay, Mr. Legate, well, she's talked about one of the highlights of this new act, which is the Award Review Tribunal. There are those who also would point to some other provisions, like the emergency arbitrator procedure, third-party funding, interim measures, and their enforcement, and all of that. What do these mean, and what are the implications for your industry?
Yeah, for third-party funding, it's quite an interesting development that we have now. It means that a party who has a good case but doesn't have the money with which to prosecute the matter could get funding from a third party, you know, of course for a fee. You know, the third party will definitely collect a fee at the end of the day if the claimant is successful. So that will actually help, you know. So a claimant who has a good case and does not have money to prosecute it could have funding, prosecute his case, and then if eventually he wins, you know, the funder, you know, takes part of the proceeds. However, we must look at that very closely because we've seen all over the world that third-party funding became a means of business for speculators, you know, who just speculate on cases, fund the cases, and then make a lot of money out of it, because at times, you know, some of these awards will be very huge, you know, like the PNID case where, you know, an award of $6.6 billion was awarded against Nigeria. You know, if that with interest, that award now is over 11 billion. So because of that, third-party funders are always very willing to fund arbitration matters, you know. So we have to look at that. So the law has to regulate that very well to ensure that third-party funding, which is good in itself, is not abused. Talking about emergency arbitrators, what that has actually done is to reduce the intervention of courts. You know, the courts intervenes and they do very, very well, you know, in the interventions because it's necessary most times, you know. But with emergency arbitrator, what you now have is that instead of a party rushing to court, the party can ask the court or an arbitration institution like ours to appoint an emergency arbitrator. And that is done within 3 days. Once the court or the arbitration institution receives that request, in 3 days, he appoints an emergency arbitrator. And the purpose for that is at times the issue at stake could be perishable items. Somebody is claiming for money, and then the money is in the other party's account. Money can be transferred away out of the account. So you just want a situation where that money is preserved. So an emergency arbitrator comes in to give an order preserving the rest. We call that the rest, preserving the subject matter, or the item could be perishable, like tomatoes, for instance, running to several millions of naira or dollars. So the emergency arbitrator comes in to give an order, to make an order to preserve, maybe sell off the perishable goods, and then keep the money in a dedicated account, pending the outcome of the arbitration. So it's a good development. And that will also, like I said, reduce the intervention of the courts and also free the courts of a few more cases.
How about the issue she mentioned of the courts when some people are not satisfied with the decision of the intervention of the arbitration, they still go to the same courts?
Yes, that is like I said, you really cannot rule out entirely intervention of the courts, because there are areas where you need them. So if, for instance, an award is final, is binding on the parties, is final, but you see there are few instances where the law allows a party who is dissatisfied to approach the court to set aside the award. I think that is fine. Okay. The point Mrs. Oshodi-John mentioned is when a matter now goes to court, what the new act has tried to do now is when courts intervene, the new act gives them timelines. Unlike before, where the matter can be in court, it takes the normal route, it could run into months, years, but now there are timelines.
Okay, all right. Well, Mr. Oshodi-John, you've talked about the UNCITRAL a few times. That's the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. Tell us about that, a little more explanation on that, and how this new law sinks. How much more? Because you've talked about it, you referenced it like once or twice. Talk to us about that, UNCITRAL, the model, and how this new law in Nigeria syncs with it.
Before I talk about UNCITRAL, I just remember that it was something that was very crucial that we needed to talk about, and that has to do with misconduct. A lot of the awards that are set aside on the basis of misconduct, either that the arbitrator misconducted himself or things happen that is regarded as a misconduct under flimsy excuses, and awards are set aside. But with the new law now, that's one of the reasons also why a lot of the state parties didn't like Nigeria to be a seat. They didn't want to do the matters in Nigeria because they felt that the awards can be set aside for spurious reasons. So with the new law, with the new act now, there's nothing like misconduct. It has been scrapped. So for me, it's a big one for us, a game changer for Nigeria. So when an award is rendered against a party, you can't run to the courts anymore to say, oh, the arbitrator misconducted himself, so I want to challenge your award, I want to set it aside. The only grounds in which you can set aside an award now is probably on grounds of public policy, grounds of disclosure issues. Maybe the arbitrator did not disclose, conflict of interest and things like that. So when we come to the issue of UNCITRAL basically is a body of the United Nations that has been set up to make policies and laws for state parties to enable international trade, free flow of trade in goods and services. And UNCITRAL has been doing this for so many years. And just recently, I and Mr. Olege were in Vienna, Austria, representing the Nigerian Institute, our institute at UNCITRAL, because we have an observer status at UNCITRAL. So we're there, and we saw that a lot is happening at the international scene, and that we needed to be a part of it. And it's something that I want to appeal to the government of Nigeria to please do more, because we have a lot of small nations fully represented on UNCITRAL. And Nigeria comes in, but they don't have the full representation for the period we were there. UNCITRAL has this commission once a year for about 3 weeks, where they review different laws, starting from laws that has to do with commercial transactions, to warehousing, to microcredit, MSCs, to, shipping and maritime, so many issues, electronics, now today, we're talking about how do we use electronics to capture data, to do business transactions and so on and so forth. All of these are being looked into by UNCITRAL, where they bring in experts from different countries, representing their countries as delegates, to speak on behalf of their countries, to push the interest of their countries. Of course, a lot of time you will not get what you want. So there's a room for negotiation. There's a lot of negotiation, a lot of
mediation.
Mediation, a lot of, I wouldn't say mediation, there's a lot of interest. Everybody in negotiation trying to protect their interest.
I deliberately called it mediation because after all, that's what you do.
Yeah.
But I'm asking whether or not this new law helps to address some of the issues, some of the concerns.
The new law helps to address some of the issues, not all of the issues, because UNCITRAL is a current structure of the UN where they look at new developments internationally and they begin to think about policies to make it more convenient for state parties to continue to do their transactions peacefully across state borders.
So how much, Mr. Olege, do you think this new law will encourage foreign investment? I know you referenced the PNIB case the other time, a PNID case the other time, but does this law help in any way to encourage foreign investment inflows into the country?
Yes, I think so. I think so. The law is very contemporary now. The law is up to date. The law mirrors the current UNCITRAL modern law on arbitration, and of course, UNCITRAL rules on mediation, and even the Singapore Convention on Mediation, which is very current. So the law has been able to bring all this together into, into one place. So Nigeria now is very current when you talk about resolving commercial disputes, international commercial disputes or domestic commercial disputes, and of course, by extension, investment disputes. So that way, we are expecting to see increase in foreign direct investments. However, legal framework, modernizing your legal framework is not enough. You also have to reform your institutions. There must be institutional reforms.
Good.
And that is where we must really address as a nation.
Well, leads me to my next question to Mrs. Oshodi John. So how does this new act, how does it enhance the practice?
The new act does enhance practice to a very large extent compared to where we're coming from. You remember, in the past, the law, the way it was in the former act, was a bit not so. The powers that were given to arbitral institutions was limited. But now we have a lot of powers. The scope of powers, of authority that we have. For instance, my institute, the Nigeria Institute of Arbitrators, we can do a lot now, unlike in the past. In the past, when people come to us, parties come to us to appoint an arbitrator for them, sometimes we are handicapped in appointing arbitrators because their arbitration clause, like talked about. Arbitration clause is a sentence that you put in an agreement to say that if you have a dispute or have any issues that has to do with your claim or controversies, the parties have chosen to go to arbitration. So arbitration clause is what gives the power to arbitral institutions or the court to appoint an arbitrator or for parties to come to arbitration. Where there is no arbitration clause, you can't go to arbitration. So that's the starting point. Unfortunately, in some instances, we've seen a lot of contracts that contain invalid or defective arbitration clauses. And because of that, there's a stalemate for the parties. Parties are stuck. They can't go to the court. They can't go to arbitration. But in this instance, when you have this kind of situation, with the new act, it enables and empowers us, the Nigerian Institute as an arbitral institution, to, whether the parties have a valid clause or not, as long as it is the decision or the desire of the parties to go to arbitration, we can appoint an arbitrator for them. That will ensure that the arbitration matter that is speedily dealt with on behalf of the parties, unlike in the past. And now as well, if parties come to us and they say, okay, well, the arbitration award that was issued by maybe a member of our institute, they are not comfortable with it, they're challenging it, then my institute can set up a review panel to review that award if the party choose. And then whatever the panel comes up with becomes final and binding on the parties. So you can see that now the parties have an option. They don't have to run to the courts. And with that, the time frame in which matters are dealt with and dispensed with is drastically reduced. So these are one of the beautiful things of the new Arbitration Act.
But you mentioned, that you are just an arbitration institution. So let me ask you.
No, I didn't mention we're just an arbitration institution.
You said you are one.
We are an arbitration institution. We also administer mediation matters.
No, what I mean by that is,
dispute resolution, alternate dispute resolution institution.
The question that I'm asking is, are you the only?
No.
Okay, that's the point.
There are other institutions in Nigeria, but we are the foremost by the premier arbitration institute in sub-Saharan Africa. We were founded 44 years ago. Okay. So we are the national body of arbitration institutes that comprises of all professionals from all sectors in Nigeria.
All right, so for all arbitration institutions, I mean, she's talked about the responsibilities that they have and all of that. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the individuals who perform the activities. I think it was you who cited the P&ID case, for instance. Okay, I think maybe it was Mrs. Yoshodi John, who cited what they call flimsy excuses you used?
Yes, misconduct.
Misconduct.
Under misconduct.
And all those things. At the end of the day, it comes down to the practitioners of arbitration and mediation in the country. How does this law, this new law, help to streamline practice and keep them in line so that those misconducts don't show up in other ways?
Yeah, when it comes to the issue of misconduct, actually, all the arbitration institutions have their ethical standards and rules, of conduct for the arbitrators. And that is why it's actually very important, what you just said now. The new act now provides that encourages practitioners, lawyers, to support, the arbitration mechanism, So I see the new act actually helping in such a way that, although again, like I said, the new act doesn't prescribe any punishment. The new act doesn't prescribe any punishment. But if you are, for instance, a lawyer and you are an arbitrator, then of course you are subject to the
MBA.
The MBA, the legal practitioners' rules of ethics. Okay. If you are an engineer, you are also subject to the rules of ethics of your profession. So really, there are other ways by which you could guide against misconduct. And also for every arbitration institution, the first thing an institution will want to have in place, put in place, is rules of conduct. How the arbitrators should conduct themselves. And of course, these institutions can punish arbitrators when they run foul of these rules.
Okay. Well, we have to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this morning. You spoke about the conference that you're having?
Yes. I was just going to say that part of what we do as an arbitral institute is to promote the domestication and practice of arbitration in Nigeria and beyond. And so every year we have an annual conference. And this year we're looking at repositioning the arbitration practice in Africa. And that has to do with how do we make arbitration more friendly, the African part of it. How do we ensure that, like we talked about the seat, that arbitration matters are not really ferried out of our continent. We have the African Trade Agreement now that Nigeria is signatory of, trade in goods and services across our continent. And so this is where...
Yeah, when is this conference?
The conference comes up the 16th and 17th of November is going to be held in Abuja at Abuja Continental Hotel. And we are inviting everyone, including you, you know, as a media
You
people,
pay for this advert that you're
join
doing, just
us
by the way.
in November.
Yeah, thank you so much. Shola Oshodi-John is Registrar, Nigeria Institute of Chartered Arbitrators. Thank you so much for your time this morning, as well as Francis Olege, who is faculty member, Nigerian Institute of Chartered Arbitrators. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
So now you know, we're taking another conversation when we return from this break. Do stay with us.
Daddy, the cough is still disturbing me badly.
You are coughing. You are coughing. You people will not kill me with cough in this house. Let me call your mother.
Hello, honey.
Don't honey me anything. You better remain in the village. You forgot that you left children at home. All the children have been coughing. I've given them the drugs I know. Nothing is working. I'm tired. And you know I'm not a doctor. I don't know what
Honey, calm down. Why not give them Neofilin cough syrup? Neofilin cough syrup is a cough linctus that puts an end to cough, cold, and catarrh. It's very fast in action. It has been tested and trusted for adults and children.
Okay, let me try. Did you say Neofilin?
Yes, Neofilin cough syrup.
Daddy, good morning, Daddy. I'm no more coughing.
Wow, so fast. Neofilin has done it.
Neofilin cough syrup is manufactured by Mopsin Pharmaceutical Limited, 47 Osolowe, Ajawa Estate, Oshodi, Lagos. If symptoms persist after 3 days, consult your doctor.
Bring it on, bring it on. You, bring it on. Life no dey sweet oh, hey. Some people know they hate oh. So use the number 6 oh, calculate. You go see the ratio. The beef self na meat oh, whether na asu them relate oh. So bring your own crayfish oh, we go mix oh, oh Lord. Oh, share na them talk say we no go blow. Oh, share them they see us now, we don't dey glow. Take a look at me now, take a look at me now. Running things in this town, can't you see? I don't care who you are, where you from, what you do. Just as long as you're chasing money, do what's right, never give up on it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, for staying with us this morning. We want to have conversations around this Ensuring Inclusive Governance series, which is intended to raise awareness, create public discourse, and urge the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to act in nominating a person with a disability for a ministerial position. Well, from conversations that have been had, the absence of any person with a disability among the President's ministerial nominees is a disheartening oversight, especially in the face of widespread advocacies for the inclusion of persons with disabilities in key decision-making positions. Let's have conversations around this and ask and raise a number of issues with Dr. Chike Okogo, who is founder and chief responsibility officer at the Center for Ability, Rehabilitation and Empowerment Care. He is with us, along with Ambassador Ndifreke Andrew Essien, executive director, Fair Care Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Ambassador, let me begin with you. First of all, what were the initial reactions, for the disability community and advocates upon discovering that persons with disabilities were not nominated on the ministerial list of the President?
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So one of the immediate reactions was that of dismay and concern, because a lot of advocacy has been done throughout pre-election, during the election and post-election period concerning increase of inclusion of persons with disabilities across the political process and even across sectors in Nigeria and different positions. So it was an indication of things to come. Like, let's say that was the perception. And that's why the conversations have been stirred to try to speak up and to begin to speak to the issues even now without waiting. So for the disability community at large, it was one of, vexation and as well as concern, and are these a sign of things to come? Is this going to be another time where we're going to be excluded from a lot? So that was the reaction. It was not one of it was not one that was a happy one. Everybody was concerned. Everyone was perplexed and kind of dismayed that this is going to probably be a sign of things to come, and that's why we're speaking up today.
Dr. Kogu, what specific appeals and advocacies would you say were made to government, to ensure the representation of persons with disabilities in leadership positions?
Thank you, Ayo, for having me, and good morning, Nigeria. If you recall back sometime last year, I personally started this advocacy. The These Day newspapers carried, in fact, These Day newspaper carried my position in one of their editorials sometime last year. This was far before the campaigns even started. So we've been on this. We've been talking, we've been writing, we've been discussing this, we've been reaching out. It's annoying, honestly. I don't like saying certain words, but the president campaigned on a renewed hope mantra. Sadly, today there is no hope, and it is painful. TAF Africa has been leading this campaign. Fake Care has been doing it. IFA, Inclusive Friends Association.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure that we'll get Dr. Kogu back. So, Ambassador, this is, a long-lasting conversation, clearly. But would you say that there are any legal provisions or constitutional provisions in Nigeria that promote the inclusion of persons with disabilities in political or leadership roles?
Thank you very much. So, in alluding to the conversation, and one of the things that has allowed our conversation to have a stronger voice, indeed, is the laws on ground. So if you remember, in January of 2019, the past administration, under the leadership of President Muhammad Buhari, signed into law the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Prohibition Acts. And that one document, among others, has been a backing to the voice of persons with disabilities, has allowed us to be able to stand knowing that legally we are protected or we are not excluded from political processes. So in that document, the Prohibition Act, it is stated in Part 6 in Section 30 about the importance of opportunity of employment and participation of persons with disabilities in policies and public life, and that includes the political process. It also talks about a situation where PWD should be encouraged to fully participate in politics and public life, and that government should actively promote an environment in which persons with disabilities can effectively and fully participate in activities and administration, speaking to political parties and political processes, and of course, different sectors in country. In fact, that law also speaks to the credence of employment of persons with disabilities using the quota system, and it speaks to 5% of employability for persons with disabilities in all public institutions. So yes, there are legal documents. This is one of such examples, and we see how inclusion, was really portrayed in the renewed the Electoral Act of 2022, where stipulations were made to ensure that there was inclusion in the electoral process and even speaking to political parties. So there's quite a bit that has allowed or has lended to the voice of persons with disabilities.
So why then, my apologies, why then would you say these things aren't factored into such positions as are being clamored now?
Okay, so what we're saying is that there is one thing with having laws, there's another thing with implementation of laws and policies, as well known in this country. So while we have some legal frameworks, policies, and laws to support our conversation, which we're having this morning, and pushing for the agenda to be considered, we see that the position of political will can be very tricky, where there is an ignorance of the law or lack of consideration, as it were. And that's why we're speaking to the issues. We're not saying that it's not there provided for, but we're beginning to see it play out in another cycle of conversation, in another cycle of appointment. It may seem that persons with disabilities will once again be excluded. And that's why these conversations are happening. And we're trying to say no, that this should not be the instance or the case per se, because Nigeria has progressed from where we were to currently where we are, and we should not be having this conversation over and over again. But like you said, it's a long and a continuing conversation that we'll continue to have.
Kogu,
can I chip in?
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Continuing this conversation, there is also a law to this effect signed by former President Muhammadu Buhari. There's an act to this effect. And the act says it clearly that at least 5% of employment must be given to persons with disabilities. So if you have a law that says at least 5%, it technically means that if the president is employing ministers, he should at least consider 5% of his cabinet to be persons with disabilities. We're not. You see, I want to say this clearly here. We have been begging. Enough of the begging. Persons with disabilities are not beggars. As I speak to you, the governor of a state like Texas is a person with disability. Gregory Abbott is on a wheelchair. Former president of Algeria, Bouteflika, was on a wheelchair. We can go on and on. America has been led by two presidents. FDR, Francis Delano Roosevelt, on a wheelchair. We can go on and on. The list is endless. In Australia, you have persons with disabilities everywhere. In Canada, you have them. Why can't we do such in Nigeria?
Dr. Kogu, so perhaps by way of emphasis and understanding for those who may not, really get it, what potential benefits could Nigeria gain from having persons with disabilities in decision-making positions within government?
So much. Persons with disabilities are driven by 4 key items, which we'll call CORE, C-O-R-E. CORE stands for courage, opportunity, responsibility, and empowerment. This is the willpower that drives all persons with disabilities. Added to that, the World Health Organization tells you that 15% of your population is assumed to be persons with disabilities. What that also means technically is that if you exclude these 15% persons, your gross domestic product will be shortchanged by 15%. So the advantage of including PWDs in all spheres of life is that you will capture the hitherto lost 15% of your GDP. If Mr. President appoints a person with disabilities in his cabinet, it begins to cascade down from the presidency to the states, local governments, private sector. Inclusion in the 21st century will now become a thing of reality in Nigeria. We have gone past the era of pleading that persons with disabilities be recognized. You and I are members of the FRSC Celebrity Special Marshal. Why am I there? I was going to the airport in Abuja on December 15, 2006 And I suffered, I was involved in a car crash where I suffered a spinal cord injury. That changed my narrative. It changed my story. It can happen to anybody. So being born with a disability, my sister here with me, Friki too, she was involved in a car crash, spinal cord injuries. It can happen to anybody. And now let me tell you, Yoruba says, there's a parable in Yoruba, ẹni nǹkan tó fẹ́ kú pẹ̀lú ẹ̀, ọwọ́ ẹni tó ti sọnù ńkọ́. Those of us tó ti sọnù lọ́wọ́ wa, those of us who have lost the use of certain parts of our bodies, we find it difficult to, we find it difficult to put life together from what it used to be for us and what it is not. For those born with a disability, it is even more challenging. Yes, some of us are the bridge between being able and not being able anymore. That's why we're able to even speak, speak so hard about this, speak, to the issues. But more importantly, it is time for Nigeria and Africa. I repeat, President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa once said that a country that does not take care of her vulnerable people is a country that is not doing well. I also add to this that a country that does not take care of her vulnerable people, persons with disabilities and the rest of them, is a wicked country. I don't see President Bola Tinubu as a wicked person, except he wants to prove me otherwise. I don't see the Chief of Staff as Chief of Staff, Honorable Femi Gbadagba was in the forefront of making sure that the act was signed. How come he's now Chief of Staff and he suddenly, as we speak, not a person has been appointed as an SA or P or anything on disabilities. Lagos State was the pride of Nigeria. LASODA, Lagos State Office of Disability Affairs, was created. Lagos State pushed and got things going well for persons with disabilities at the level of governance. I'm surprised that President Bola Tinubu, who was former governor of Lagos State, has not seen through to realize that what he did in Lagos State that made him what Lagos State did that made them the darling of the disability community, they are losing it. These are all part of the opportunities that are being lost.
One wonders, Dr. Kogo, let me ask Ambassador, if there are steps civil society, disability organizations, and the public can take to rectify what some might say is this missed representation, I don't think it is too late. So is there any role for, civil society organizations and the rest of them to at least find a way to rectify this situation or, through one or two other means?
So one of the key partners would be media partners, and that's why we're here today. Another key partners will be the civil society organizations. So while you champion causes, this is a good cause to champion with respect to inclusion, and not just at federal level. I'm based in River State, in Port Harcourt in River State, and I know that the considerations of persons with disabilities in state are very limited, in fact, almost zero, because of a lack of consideration of persons with disabilities. A lot of times what we have noticed, stems from misconceptions that come from negative stereotyping of persons with disabilities. Initial conception of a person when you meet or engage with a person with disability is that of vulnerability, without understanding that vulnerability does not demerit a person's ability to serve in public office, in civil service, across board in different sectors. So partnerships are crucial for advancing development in this country. And so civil society organizations can join to lend their voices to speak against what would be an obvious exclusion at federal level, MDAs, appointments, even other appointments beyond the ministerial appointment list, of persons with disabilities, ensuring inclusion in different sectors. I think another thing that I need to speak to is a misconception that if a person with disability is engaged, the person will become a liability. And that is not correct. Persons with disabilities have proven time and time again to be assets. And that's what I want to add to this conversation, that they are assets to, any stream that they are added into, whether the education sector, the health sector, across board and different levels of governance. So speaking to partnerships for inclusion, everybody is involved, including people in the society. We need to begin to understand that disenfranchising over 30 million people in a country should never be looked upon as something that is okay. It is not okay. It will never be okay. And ignorance of this large sector of people who can elevate the economy by adding to the economy, it cannot be ignored anymore. And that's why we're speaking to this. Now, the federal government is the highest level of government and authority, the Federal Executive Council. And that's why we're saying that this government must show example. Because if you are speaking to one thing, you sign into law a thing, and you're not acting accordingly, what are you then saying to other people? What are you then saying to other levels of governance that these people don't matter? So we are speaking because, like you said, it's not late, and that's why this opportunity is timely, that something should be done to ensure that what we have said we're going to do as regards the inclusion of persons with disabilities, the intentionality of that 5% is so intentional. So it's not a suggestion. It's something that it is implied. It is something that should be done with intent. And that's what we're speaking to today. So every other person, media partners, civil society organizations, private sector, across board, this is a time to lend your voice in the spirit of partnership to speak to these issues. And not just speaking to the issues, but also in your own space, acting accordingly to ensure that you too are inclusive. Thank you.
Dr. Kogo, I'm going to ask you, well, before I go to Dr. Kogo, Madam, you've spoken about, not just civil society organizations, but individuals getting involved. How can individuals or even private organizations, how can they get involved in this campaign that you're talking about?
So thank you very much. So like we speak to the fact that when there's something that happens a lot in our mind, we say government, and we forget that government is people. Yeah. So individuals are government. At the end of the day, individuals make up the institutions. Individuals are the systems that will ensure that laws are implemented. Individuals are at the back of everything that we speak to. And that's why I mentioned individuals. At the end of the day, we're not pointing to a building, we're not pointing to anything. We point back to an individual, which makes up the nucleus of institutions, which makes up the nucleus of the different agencies. And so our mindsets must begin to change. And that's why you see me speaking to where is your mind at when you perceive disability.
Okay. Let me ask you now, Dr. Okogu. She's spoken to not just interested individuals, but also organizations. How about, engine rooms of government positions like political parties? What role do you think political parties can play in promoting inclusion by nominating and supporting candidates with disabilities for leadership positions?
Thank you very much, again. Thank you very much, Ayo. First, I want to note here that the APC, the ruling party, has been a darling of persons with disabilities. They have a strong disability wing. They have done everything that a political party needs to do. So kudos to them. I'm not a member of the APC, but I can tell you that we are proud of what the APC has done by ensuring that persons with disabilities are included in their political space from the national level down to the world level. The PDP too is doing so. The African Democratic Congress is doing so. So political parties are doing so. We have engaged with IPAC. IPAC has ensured, INEC too, through IPAC, has ensured that PWDs are given their place of pride in all spheres of political participation. We know that elections are expensive. There are other issues which TAC has always led in that too. And the issues that funding the elections of persons with disabilities has also been a challenge, but one step at a time. But more importantly, the APC, that is the ruling party, can they look inwards within their setup in their own party, since they have the structures for PWDs there, pick amongst them persons that will be in the cabinet of the minister. Former President Buhari had two special advisors on disabilities. I think Dr. Ankali was a special advisor on disability. Then there was another young man, a special assistant. We want to take it a notch higher, beyond special advisor and special assistant. Let us have persons with disabilities play other roles in governance, not just in disability. I represented persons with disabilities on the board of Shopee under the government of President Jonathan. But guess what? I was the head of the subcommittee on railways, and I tell you, I beat my chest to say, the phenomenal successes, the blueprint and framework that we put together with the Nigerian Railway Corporation, the 25-year master plan for railway, is what is still being implemented today. On 80 years after a new government came in, President Buhari, he continued from there with Minister Rotimi Amechi. How many people know that? I mean, how many people do recall that a person with disabilities actually oversaw the putting together of that of those plans? So I say proudly that as a PWD, designing the railway master plan, we were able to put in place a lot of new things and ideas and ensure that there was inclusion in the railway sector. Transportation sector in Nigeria is failing. Public mass transit, you can see that it is difficult. Lagos State, I repeat again, is doing well. At least the BRT buses that have traveled on one or two of them, they are disability friendly. But what of other states? Lagos is just one state out of Nigeria. There is need for a change. The president campaigned on renewed hope. At this stage, persons with disabilities have lost hope. There is no hope again. Can he rekindle that hope? Whatever it is, we need that hope to come back. Okay. It is important.
Well, madam, let me ask you the same question, but take it this way. How can we foster a more inclusive and accessible political environment that encourages active participation from citizens like those living with disabilities?
Okay, so thank you very much. One of the things that can be done is to consider disability as not just a special need, but consider that disability and disability affairs are important. So one of the starting points would be for Ministry of Disability Affairs at federal level, we need to have our own ministry. That would be perfect in ensuring that disability mainstreaming happens across sectors. Another thing is that different parastatals in government should begin to have what we call an inclusion policy, so that anything that is being done, whether it is humanitarian efforts, I mean, we see all sorts that happen, and then disability considerations or inclusion is seen as an afterthought. We need to change those kind of things. So inclusion policies and strategies, I mean, even the United Nations has an inclusion strategy. So why can't we begin to adopt some of these measures that ensure that disability mainstreaming is across? I did mention the Electoral Act of 2022 because one of the things that it did was that it really spoke to and allowed for persons with disabilities to participate, and provisions were made, even those we didn't see a lot of that happen on the field. It also spoke to political participation in political parties for persons with disabilities, that allow more persons with disabilities in the disability community to be card-carrying members. And we hope and we want those numbers to increase. We are speaking within the political process, because we know that the political process does not just end, during elections or after elections, or with the appointment of different officers, but it continues and it shows in the cycle of development. So like Dr. Chike had mentioned, not just the ministerial list, which was speaking to Mr. President to do the needful by ensuring that he adds a person with disability, because ministerial position has to do with a lot of administration and management, and many persons in the disability community have the capability to be ministers, commissioners, etc. So inclusion policies across governments, across ministries and agencies will be one key way to ensure disability mainstreaming. one last thing I'd like to add is that within political parties, for example, where there are issues of discrimination, I'm asking because we had a case where, like in River States, there were complaints about discrimination on the basis of disability, where current members in some political parties were not allowed to take on the desired positions or desired posts in this past elections. So where discrimination on the basis of disability happens, we want the laws to be enforced as well. So these are some of the things that I can mention. There's a lot to be done in country, and we are stating it categorically. The persons with disabilities are able and willing to be part of decision-making processes across board.
Well, Dr. Okogu, you've referenced this, you've spaded it. I'd like you to speak copiously to this, and that is the role that governors can play at the state's level, and even at local government levels, to ensure good governance for persons living with disabilities. How about inclusion at the state's levels? How far-reaching is the advocacy at the state's level as well? Because I believe that if we had strong enough advocacies at the state level, I mean, the direct impact to the people will be felt even closer home. What do you think?
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. And I want to give kudos at this point to Governor Yahaya Bello. He may have his elements, but one thing he does well is that he has employed more persons with disabilities in his government. Not just because of, not to serve in the disability area, but to serve in other areas. And that is what we're talking about, inclusion. Governors have a responsibility to ensure inclusion at all levels of governance in their states. So yes, this advocacy is going further. We're also talking to the governors. Appoint commissioners, appoint SAs, appoint whatever you need to appoint persons with disabilities to serve in different areas of your cabinet, because indeed, once there is inclusion that accommodates persons with disabilities, the first thing it does is that it will create hope for other PWDs to know that, oh, indeed, this person is here. I can also be there. I can make it if this person can make it, because that's one area of influence that is lacking in the lives of PWDs. Our best foots or our best brains are not put out there. We do it in our private capacities. That's why we run our own NGOs and all that. We create labor, we employ people and all that. But beyond that, the assistance and support of government from the national level to the state government and local government level will go a long way. And that's why we're begging. That's why I'm not begging. Sorry, I don't want to use the word begging. That's why we're insisting to President Bola Tinubu that the law says employ at least 5% of us. Put one person there, and you'll see that the light will begin to shine from top to bottom. Persons with disabilities will be accommodated in every sphere, and inclusion will become a great thing to embrace. Disability is not a curse. Disability is not inability. Disability is an ability to become special. We think differently, we work differently. Look, if you see how we survive, I tell you, this 17 years of my being on a wheelchair now has made me a greater and better person than the previous 36 before the car crash. So we can do more.
Okay.
Nigeria can do more. Nigeria should not be in the dark anymore. We should not be in the Stone Ages where people with disabilities are treated with contempt and, with contempt and disdain.
Yeah.
They should be brought to the table, because
Absolutely.
we are at the hegemony stage of it now.
Okay.
I talk about the John Gaventa 3 phases of power. The first phase of power was when...
Oh dear, just wanted you to land on that point. Dr. Chike Okogu, founder and chief responsibility officer at the Center for Ability, Rehabilitation and Empowerment, CARE. Thank you so much for your time and perspectives, as well as Dr. Ambassador Ndifreke Andrew Essien, Executive Director of Fair Care Foundation. Thank you so much, madam, for joining this conversation this morning. let me not say, let's hope it is not a missed opportunity, but a redirected one. We're back right after now for another conversation. Do stay with us. Okay, that is the spiritual self-healing practice. But whether or not that will come into play, I guess we'll see in the coming days. But for now, we're still talking about the human body, this humongous machine, this extremely complex, intricately complex machine, which we have been told continually possesses an enormous, astonishing, and persistent capacity to heal itself. Disease generally occurs when we abuse our bodies or deprive the body of basic requirements to keep it healthy over extended periods. There are those who have also decrypted the word disease into dis-ease, when your body is no longer at ease. That is what it says. We know this morning, the focus, let's have a little focus on the cells. You know, I've said it a number of times. You probably don't even remember that your human body has at least three categories that I know. Well, there's someone here to tell us whether there are more. Blood cells, bone cells, body cells. It was a shock for me to discover that my bones are actually made of cells. I was shocked, but hey. So, and there are about 37 trillion, at least, in the human, adult human body. Now, the most fundamental unit of the human body is the cell. Let's have this conversation this morning with Bukola Agumbiade, who is a pharmacist and consultant lifestyle doctor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
The cell is the most fundamental unit of the human body. It is the smallest, almost unseen, but it is the collaboration of everything. All human life originally begins with one single cell. So when we talk about self-healing habits and practices, how vulnerable is the human being from that one cell?
The whole human being is actually formed from stem cells. Initially, it starts from once the conceiving process starts, where you have the ovary and the sperm coming together. Then you have cell division taking place all through the 9 months. So our tissues are aggregations of cells. The organs are aggregation of tissues. Then the body system is where you have the different organs coming together. So that's the classification, that is the hierarchy. So the self-healing, basically the body has a way of healing itself if you don't abuse it, if you take care of it. But there are so many things that we expose ourselves to that reduces these chances. Then as we age, these stem cells that we were formed from, they become dormant as we grow older. And as we expose ourselves to different things, they become dormant. So, but as we take care of ourselves or we expose ourselves to things is what determines the level of stem cells that we have left in our body. The stem cells are the ones that repair the body. They are the ones that are able to regulate the self-repair of the body. Even the immunity, I was speaking to somebody and the person was asking me, what's the difference between immunity and stem cell? I would like to explain that even the body immunity, which is the white blood cells, is actually also formed from the stem cell. The stem cell is the unspecified cells that we have in our body, but they have the ability to change depending on whatever we need into different specified cells.
So now that you've spoken about this immunity, you are essentially going in the trajectory of the immune system or something like that in the body. How do we make ourselves vulnerable in that regard? Because, you know, we hear it often. People say, you know, build your immune system so you are not vulnerable to diseases and all those things. First of all, how do we compromise that immune system? We'll now talk about how we'll build it, but how do we compromise it? Isn't this supposed to be natural?
Nothing, I think from that stance, that shows us that nothing comes on a platter of gold. You have to work for everything, including your immunity. You have to work for it. You can't just eat anything, abuse your body, do not exercise, stress yourself, and just expect the immunity to be there. No. If you go through too much stress, it will increase cortisol in the system, which will increase oxidative stress, and of course that will reduce your immunity. If you don't eat the right foods, if you take junks, it increases the inflammation in the system. That would also reduce your body immunity. If you don't sleep well, you have an accumulation of protein that we call amyloids. When you have this, there's something we call protein aggregation in the body, which is also a form of abuse to the body. It's also a type of poison into the system. So you've reduced your immunity with all of this.
Sorry, take us through a process, right? The process of what the normal human body should go through in a day to preserve its immunity. You've talked about inadequate sleep. You've talked about too much stress. We've also heard from another department of, you know, medical science and all that a measure of stress is good for the body. Now you are saying that stress is also not good for the body. Help us understand that. So there's a place for rest, there's a place for stress, there's a place for enough sleep, there's a place for diet. Help us know, in a 24-hour day, what are the proportions that people should look out for in this regard?
Okay, to maintain your body immunity, within 24 hours, because it's actually the tiny drops of water that make a mighty ocean. It starts from how many hours of sleep you had over the night. Make sure you at least have 8 hours. Try to at least have 8 hours. When you wake up in the morning, you help your GIT by taking warm water.
Sorry, on that sleep, just very, very short one. There are those who say you need to burn the midnight oil and all those things. Why are you laughing? You need to burn the midnight oil. You need to, do some things in the night. You don't sleep all the time. You don't just sleep all through the night. You need to work sometimes in the middle of the night. Then there are those who, students, for instance, I'm sure you did it when you were in school.
Definitely.
They read, studied in the middle of the night and all those things. So where is the balance?
It's not, of course, once in a while you would have to cheat nature. Once in a while you would have to burn the midnight candle. But it shouldn't be an habit. It shouldn't be there. I've seen people watch movies over the night. It's not like they're doing anything.
No, if watching movies is doing something, maybe they are studying the movie.
Okay, possibly. But it shouldn't be, you shouldn't form an habit of depriving your body of good sleep all the time.
Okay.
When you wake up in the morning, take warm water to help the GIT. That would help reduce the
pH.
What's
the GIT?
The GIT starts from the mouth to the rectum.
Okay.
So when you take warm water in the morning, it helps to flush the system kind of and balance the acidity of the stomach and the GIT
How much
tract.
water?
A glass cup of warm water in the morning.
Warm water?
Yes, because some people would find it nauseating to take cold water or ordinary room temperature in the morning. Go about your normal day. Try and expose yourself to morning sunlight. Take breakfast at the right time. I'm not of the school of thought of just eat because it's breakfast. Try and eat when you're hungry, or have a schedule of how you eat. Make sure you don't starve, and make sure you don't overeat. You take good breakfast, a lot of protein, a lot of vegetable, carbohydrate, depending on your activity level for that day.
Okay.
You take your lunch.
On the breakfast and lunch, what if the person is fasting? Ramadan time, Lenten time?
That's what I said.
That takes about 1 month each.
That's
and
just
there are
1
those
month out
who
of
have,
12.
my apologies, there are those who have, intermittent fasting from time to time.
Those are exceptions.
Okay.
Those are exceptions. Of course, when
that's the part of cheating nature, right?
Yes, that's the part of cheating nature. No, but it also comes with its benefits. Fasting comes with its benefits.
We'll come to the benefits of fasting, but go ahead.
But the excessiveness is what some people just have an habit of. They are not fasting. They have an habit of just making sure they put their body in starvation mode. Not because they want to lose weight, but I think it's an hallmark of an hustler to, I skipped breakfast or I skipped lunch or whatever. It shouldn't be an habit.
Okay.
Try and, for the people working behind desk, you don't sit all through. Sedentary lifestyle is also something that is not good for you. You don't sit all through. Try and get up from your desk every 2 hours. Take your dinner at the right time. Go to bed early. Exercise. Drink a lot of water. Hydrate throughout the day. 3 to 4 liters of water every day. Those are ways to help to build your body immunity throughout 24 hours. But even in the course of doing all of this day to day, there are still some things that still robs us of the essential trace elements and the nutrients that we need. Like, you can't really vouch for the extent of nutrition you're getting from the meals you're taking. You can't even vouch for something might have happened in your system. Maybe you were sick, you took an antibiotic, you have your microbial flora is not okay, it's not balanced, and you're eating at that point in time. The absorption of nutrition or nutrients at that time might be compromised. So you need to, once in a while, periodically take essential nutrients and vitamins as supplements. Those are things you can do. Then once in a while, have cold, ice cold, or very hot sauna baths. They help to fold the DNA proteins, and they help to detoxify the system, increase the lymphatic drainage. Those are things you can do. Then most recently, cacao, pure cacao powder. is something that is also very good. It's an antioxidant that helps to increase the stem cell production.
I'm suspecting you are talking about our cocoa. Is that,
yes.
or is
yes.
it a different one? Okay.
Yes, cocoa, yes.
Okay.
So those are ways you can help the body to maintain the stem cell production and, of course, maintain the body immunity over the course of time.
Now, you talked about periodic fasting. How does that come to play? How does that help the immune system or, self-healing process?
When you fast once in a while, the body goes into ketogenesis, which is able to burn off some excess free radicals, that is able to chew up some free radicals in the body. But it depends. You would have to speak to a professional to know what is good for you.
Okay.
It has to be scheduled. It's not something you just do or you just starve the body and suffer the body.
Yeah, well, of course, people have also heard, that, a little bit of fasting from time to time helps the body to regenerate this one, that one. Okay, anyway, as you said, we'll probably talk to someone else about that one. But there are other cases, situations that cannot be controlled. For instance, emergencies. Okay, you have a schedule that you're running to do one thing or the other, and for whatever reason, maybe for a whole week or intermittently, your schedule gets disrupted. You're not able to eat as and when you normally would. Your breakfast becomes lunch. Sometimes your meal time changes altogether and all those things. And then the body itself alters a number of the things that you have lined up now. Your sleep time also cuts down due to one or two of these situations. How does one work around that?
I think it's all about trying to create a balance, really, because I really don't think there's really nobody that has a settled or a straight where everything is just straight or free like that. There are so many times you would have to juggle all of those things. But while you're at it, that's why we said habits. That was why the topic was self-healing habits. Okay. There are some little habits that we have. Like, you won't be able, next week is going to be really busy. Why don't you stock up on your favorite fruits and carry them along? Nap when you're in the car, when you can.
Not when you're driving, though. Just say.
Okay, yes. Not when you're driving, definitely. But when you park, try and do some little exercise.
Okay.
While you're driving, you can sip your water. Don't gulp water. Because when you tell some people to take water while they're driving, they'll be like, I'll have to park so many times to ease myself. No, when you're sipping, you won't need to ease yourself so much. Okay. So you sip water intermittently. Then try and rest as much as you can. When you are not driving, try and sleep. It's an habit. It's just the little habits here and there that accumulates into the big chunk.
Okay,
then rest once in a while. Go on vacation and rest.
I was going to talk about vacation. How about, we'll come to relaxation altogether, but how about those whose job entails a lot of traveling that alters their time clock, the body clock, alters everything about their lives? Diplomats, international businessmen and women and all those things. How do they realign, so to speak? How do they make up for whatever they may have lost?
For those who love their health and they don't joke with it, they work with professional stem cell therapists and medical personnel who are able to help them. Because if you are able to enhance your body healing habits through stem cell therapies, so your body is able to heal itself at a faster rate. During stem cell therapy, they give you a lot of antioxidants that you take as supplements or as IV treatment, whatever, to increase your metabolism. So your body will be able to cope with the level of stress that you are doing. Yes. So that is what they do. They visit stem cell therapists like me and some other professionals to help them in that line. And they take a lot of antioxidants, work on their diet, and make sure they take a break once in a while.
How about relaxation? How does it help?
Of course, relaxation is the same thing as sleep. It helps a lot.
Okay. Just this one thing. It's been eating at me. I was hoping that I wouldn't have to mention it. How about those who have, I don't know how to, those whose diseases didn't come, or like maybe blood pressure, those that are from genetic, foundations, like, blood pressure and a number of other situations like that could, injure their health as well. What do they do?
For people who are genetically hypertensive, there's also the part of we call something epigenetics, which is how your body reacts to the behavior, how the environment and your behavior affects the expression of your DNA. So the fact that you have it genetically does not mean it has to express.
Okay.
So when they work with professionals, they can help them keep a tab on it. Apart from diabetes, we have autoimmune diseases, which are things that are genetically transferred. But these are things that working with a stem cell therapist and medical professionals can help you put a tab on it, because the body heals itself by itself. Okay. So the wrong DNA expressions will not happen.
Well, food for thought. Thank you so much this morning for coming and giving us these perspectives. Bukola Agumbiade is a pharmacist and consultant lifestyle doctor. Thank you again for your time. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Now we know how we can heal ourselves. We're back right after now. Do stay with us for the home run. You'll love it.
Say
Okay. Well, my guest says that song is apt to welcome him to this segment this morning. They call him the king of comedy. And the song you just listened to, if you didn't know the meaning of Kabiezi, well, essentially means king. Well, it's a word for king. It means don't question him or something like that. But please, I am here to question this king of comedy, Ali Baba. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. After the attempted coup. We'll take a break now. No, after the attempts to get here last week, and which was a consequence of failed government.
Which one?
Past government.
Okay.
Because if, like when you find children on the streets that are not in school, it's a consequence of failed government. If you find people who don't speak English.
You don't think it depends on the time of day? Because
Oh,
after
no,
school, when I was growing up, we will play ball.
Oh, no, but that's not, you play ball, but you know that you have to still go to school because at that time, education was more valued than connection.
But you know what is sad? Quick one about this Lagos Urban Expressway that you mentioned. I mean, it was horrendous last week. I mean, no doubt about it.
Crazy.
I always try to get here like 2 hours before time. I just don't like stories. But this particular road, I remember growing up, going to school in Oyo. I used the Lagos Urban Expressway. I was 12, 13, 14. I was going by myself. Would you have the courage now to put your child on public transport?
In fact, you don't even have the courage to put your child with a driver now. You have to now put a nanny or some house help with the driver before the driver absconds with the car, and the next call you get is, if you don't give us... No, things have changed, but you see, that's why I said the consequence of a failed government. So it is not like it is a one government thing.
Yeah.
It's over time.
Yeah. Now, Ali, quick conversations. I can't come here and be discussing with you and asking questions that you have been asked for how many decades now in the industry?
3 going to 4.
3 going to 4 decades in the industry. I can't be asking you how you started and all those things. Those questions have been asked and answered. If you want to know, please Google it. But you have become, king of comedy. Your colleagues call you, and that's quite something. So when your contemporaries, those you started about the same time, and those who started shortly after you, or those probably who even started before you, call you king of comedy and, give you that regard of excellence, how does it feel?
So the thing is that it was hard to accept in the first instance. But
Really?
the first person that called me that was Benga Deboye.
Wow.
Benga Deboye. I didn't see it. He did an interview with Punch. Back then. And so there's a guy called Amadio Bona. He's passed now. He used to write for Vanguard, who called me and said, hey, bro, you see that write-up? I said, what write-up? He said, the Punch write-up on Benga Deboye. So he said that you are the king of comedy.
Wow.
I said, why? He said it's not because you are the best or something, but that the things that you have done to bring the comedy into the front burner of entertainment that makes people now regard comedians as... So he's not talking about, you are the funniest, you are the this, you are the... But the fact that what you did set a signpost and a pointer to the fact that this is where we're going with this. And because before me was a Jude Wewe, before me was a Boma Orokosima, before me was John Chukwu.
The rest of them.
Yes. Before me was a man that many people do not even think is a comedian, but he was Balamila. Before me was Patrick Itiore, who was on, sunny side of,
Of course, how could I forget?
Okay, exactly.
Himself and those three,
the Hausa guy and then the Yoruba man.
What's his name now? The one that acted
the grandson of
Idiof,
the grandson of Idiof. Now, and those were the kind of people who pushed comedy in their own way. But you see, stand-up was separate from being a television actor, an MC, because a lot of them infused comedy into being an MC. And so when I came on, it was like, I was like, I'm doing stand-up comedy alone. It was along the line, maybe like the second or third year of doing it, that people now said, if you can do the comedy, just do the MC as once, you know? And I started to blend the two. So if you look back, really, stand-up comedy was what I started early. So stand-up comedy was like 38 years, but MCing was about like 35. So that is how they started calling me that. And so
how striking was that for you? Being that many people may not even know Gbenga Adeboye at this time.
Many people don't know Gbenga Adeboye. Many people actually use Gbenga Adeboye's jokes. So you know Gbenga Adeboye told his jokes.
Yes.
Ituba Bata, a Yoruba guy.
Yes.
As in Yoruba language. But when they then hear it, because somebody who understands Yoruba understands it and wants to tell the joke to an Igbo guy, will say it in English.
Yeah.
And then when the person hears it, tells it to another person, people are replaying this joke and retelling them, recounting these jokes, forgetting that the person that did it has passed. And the recognition, what's his name, Mohammed Danjuma too, was also in the sport. And so there's another guy that people do not even know. That's the first Agodai. The first Agodai. He was in Bender Radio.
Yes.
Come on, guy. So the first Agodai used to do this. He said, Agodai.
It was, if you didn't listen to him on Sunday afternoon,
it was hilarious. All right?
Yeah.
So that's the first Agodai. So all of these people were great in delivering humor. People do not know the role that Wale Adenuga played in Ikebe Super. People do not know the role that Pa Johnson played. People do not know the role that Sunday Ajiboye played in the cartoons. And a lot of humorists like that.
When the Papa Jasko cartoon of those years.
Exactly. So humor had always been around. It's just the different expressions of it that spread. And then I decided I was going to do stand-up comedy alone, which was what stood me out.
Now, that leads to this issue. As I said, I will only ask you, questions of industry relevance. What you just said about Gbenga Adeboye leads to the issue of copyright.
Sure.
Music, we can talk about copyright, and there have been regulations. Even if you want to use music in a commercial, someone's music in a commercial, someone's music in a movie, there are ways to go about it now. What's the conversation around copyright in comedy?
Okay, so when we started stand-up comedy, I initially went, so you notice that Night of 1,000 Laughs can clearly be said to be one platform that helped to escalate the essence of stand-up comedy. Now, when Night of 1,000 Laughs started, and Opa Williams, Joe Adekwa, Efere Ozakov said, Ali, you have to be part of this. And I said, how many people are you putting on? And I said, and whose jokes are these people going to tell? Because at the time, I was responsible for quite a lot of the jokes that were in circulation.
Wow.
Now, you didn't have social media to magnify and share the jokes, so that you could use a joke for like 2 good months and still be holding on to that joke. But these days, if you drop the joke once, it's gone
viral.
All right, still pointing to the matter of copyright. And so when Night of 1,000 Laughs started, and they asked me for the first, second, and third edition, I said, I'm not coming on that show because you're going to record it and put on a tape. And Obino, who was the guy that was doing the CDs then, would sell it, and my jokes will go everywhere. No, so I'm not coming on. Then on the 4th one, Virgin Production called me, and Efere was there. Efere said, you know what, Ali? Forget about this issue of people using your jokes. We are growing the industry now, so make that sacrifice. Help the industry grow. Let them use your jokes. They'll give you credit. And then he said, what is happening to all these competitions that people do? What they do is, the person that is coming to perform will use a song of somebody who is established to prove that they have what it needs or what is needed. What is needed to be in the same field with them. So somebody is coming to sing R. Kelly's song, and then you use the R. Kelly song to judge whether the person's ability qualifies to let them into this space. So let that be what your problem, let that be what you should think about. Don't make it a problem. And so when he said that, I was like, oh, okay. So hold the light for everybody. So your joke is holding the light for everybody. So why make people say no? So initially, we allowed everybody. So if you notice now, what is happening, people are using jokes that we did in 1987, 88, 89, all the way to 90s. In fact, till 2000. They're using them now to make skits. So people who did not hear a joke of Adeboye, or who did not hear a joke of Baba Salah, or who did not hear a joke of Ojo Ladipo Theatre.
Yeah. Baba
Mero now converted. There's a guy too, Iria Enakimel. All right? There's Ohi Alegbe. These are all people who were in the space at the time and used to trade in humor. Now, people who did not see all of that now use those jokes. For us, really, it is now that people are commercializing it on a larger scale that we're beginning to think
issue.
Exactly, that it becomes an issue. But if it was because they needed it to grow, we allowed everybody.
But now that it's an issue.
But now that it's an issue and you're beginning to make a lot of money from it, we'll begin to now say, okay, I heard you made nearly 3 million from downloads or hits on this joke that you used and turned into a skit. So maybe you just give me 10 or 20%. That's when this conversation is beginning to happen now.
Okay.
But there was a time, there was a network that started dial a joke.
Yes.
You remember? So we mentioned the network. So they dialed a joke. And a friend called me and said, long live Ru. He said, Ali, I just dialed this thing now and I heard a joke. Is that joke that happened between me and you? I said, yes, I told it. He said, somebody has told it as his own joke on the platform and he's earning money. So I called one of the guys. He's passed now. He was in charge of Edem. He was in charge of the network at the time and the creative. And I said, this is my joke. And it's on this platform. You know, me and your guy, we can't have a problem. So please, what's happening? And it was taken down. The platform was just taken down because they said they couldn't verify people's jokes. At the time, I thought, let all comedians begin to register their jokes. But the few people who wanted to register their joke, I told the person, this joke is not yours.
Uh-oh.
This one you want to register is not even yours. The fact that you've been telling it and people let you just go on with it doesn't make it yours.
So that raises a problem of
authenticity and originality. You know, so I think what should happen is once you have proof, and when he was arguing, I went and brought a VHS tape and played the VHS tape where Mohammed Danjuma did the joke.
Wow.
At Jazzville. And he was like, oh, okay, all right. So the thing is, but it's gradual. We're beginning to get there.
The conversation has started.
The conversation has started. The Collection Society and all of that will then come in and see how you begin to get paid for the jokes that you created.
Another issue of concern for me is conflicts among, you are the king now, so to speak. So I saw just recently a song, well, a video of KSA and Chief Commander Ebenezer Obey performing on the same stage, singing each other's songs. I've listened to countless songs, even as far back as the 70s, where KSA said, they are not fighting, no. And Obey also sang, we are not fighting. I saw an interview with Teju Babyface, one of your boys, where Obey said, they never quarreled for one day. But we are seeing a different thing in comedy today. I know it is a thing of concern for you because you get to a level where your money is not the thing, that is not now the legacy. How much does that concern you? And do you see an end in sight?
Yes, I see an end in sight. But beyond that, you know, the camaraderie that we enjoyed over time, you could... The guys that had brought this issue up stayed with me and grew up with me. They started their careers in my place, all right? And after a while, they went their different ways, all right? One started earlier than the other. But one thing I'll say clearly is that they are both adults, and you would know that before the matter aggravated to this point, there's no way that we would not have called one of them or each one of them to say, hey guys, what's happening? We say. And then after a while, I got the sense that it looks like both of them have issues that they don't want anybody to know about. I think it's more than what they say, because in talking with each one, this one says, bros, I can't go there. No, don't go there, bros, leave it. Bros, you know I can't do anything. Bros, just leave that. And then you talk to the other one and say, bros, you know me, I don't have a problem. Bros, it's... And after speaking with them and telling them, man, shield your swords, you know, and it continued. And it was like, hey, this thing is not good for the industry, if you understand.
Which is my concern.
Our industry is quite like the calmest.
Yes.
Where if a comedian has a show, every other comedian shows up to help the person. If you have a movie, everybody comes to help. If you have a talk show or anything, everybody comes to help you. So I think that with time, we'll resolve it. But right now, their stance are still strong and solid. And everybody is saying, this is my position. I'm not. Even when there were some gray areas that they all claimed, oh, no, I don't know this guy, I don't know that. We still understand that you guys know yourself more than that. And the beef, as it were, goes beyond what people see.
Oh, it's definitely. The concern for me is it's not just the reigning issue now. There have been some before, and there could be that were resolved, and there could be others. You know,
there's still some brewing, and so we're dealing with some of them as
exactly.
As we can.
So for me, and I hope it will also be communicated down the ladder that it's the image of the industry, because it's still relatively young. And so once, you know, God forbid that collapse, that's the concern for me.
There won't be a collapse. You would always have people who differ in ideas, in thoughts, because they all come from different backgrounds. I was talking to someone the other day, and the person, education also matters. Upbringing, lifestyle, your clique also matters.
Your inner circle.
Your inner circle matters. There are some people in your inner circle that be like, I don't think we need this matter. There was one artist that told me, he said, there was somebody he said, I'm not going to do a duet with. The guy wanted them to do a collabo. He said, no, I'm not doing a collabo with that. He did an interview one time and he said he's the best. And so the manager in the place said, one of the managers or one of his runners, said, we'll do. He said, no, he said, we will do with the guy. Every other person some of them like to suck up to the person that is paying the bills. And all of them were saying, no, Star said he's not doing it. Why would you? He said, forget Star. Star, I'm the one telling you that guy is a leverage we should jump on. And they went on and said, and did a collabo. His career got bigger than it was. So sometimes you make sacrifices. It's just like the alliance between Buhari and CPC and ACN. You know, Buhari had tried several times. Oh, there's Sukulori television. Anyway,
I hope you know that the presidency is watching you right now.
But I'm on the side of the presidency. What? I'm not a... I said I was not going to be controversial. Okay? All right, so... But you see, when he then found out, man, I have to stoop to conquer. So leave the CPC, let's merge.
Okay.
And they merged, and he succeeded. So that happens a lot. So for me, I believe that a lot of people in my circle, they can go on like this, but after a while, we'll find the middle point.
That's cheering for me. Let's begin to, coast home. For me, that's very, very important because it's an industry that has a whole load of potential heads.
Yes.
Intelligent people. So the place of ego cannot but be found from time to time. Let's leave that one.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about Alibaba.
Sure.
How far so far, and what's next?
Okay, so one thing that I'll say quickly is that Nigeria is a place where people have a lot of cash stashed away, waiting for one idea to run with. If you cough it out or sneeze it, they already jump. They will jump on it.
Even before you are
done thinking, and then you'll be like, I thought, And so I've learned that some ideas that you have, wait, get the fund, and, and then do it. But it is to just say that I've reached a point where I am now consolidating on the different aspects of creative industry that I've played in, from television to radio to print, newsprint to I used to do cartoons when Sawyer in Fame traveled. So I was doing cartoons for Fame magazine. I used to write a column in Sunday Times. I used to write a column in This Day. I've done a lot of things. And in fact, it was when I was made the chairman of the creative industry, and people were saying, oh, who is this guy? How can a comedian be that? People who knew me started saying this and this and this and this is what this guy has done, and this is what this guy is. So he's fit for the role. So I'm beginning to consolidate on all my talents and properly curate them to the point where I can leave a legacy in each of them. For instance, there's no reason for people not to know who an architect of a building is. Because an architect is a part of the creative industry. So when he designs a house, it's a creative work. Okay. You know, you hear a song and you say, oh, that's Wizkid's song. But when you drive past a building, you just think that's a beautiful building. That's it. That's it. The owner of that idea needs to be celebrated. So if you hear a jingle and you say, oh, that jingle is beautiful, you need to know who is behind it.
A good number of people still remember the 1993 MKO.
He's our man.
But nobody knows who did it.
Nobody knows, exactly. So a lot of things like that. You also remember the time of when Ted Mukoro did Black Thing Goodo. Yes. You know, back then, newspapers made us know who did the voiceover. So there are quite a lot of things that I'm doing in the background. And very soon we'll begin to exhibit a lot of them and let people know. Okay. But like I said, it's good to keep it under wrap. But we're doing great things.
Okay. And let me put my director at risk a little bit. What's your most memorable joke?
My most memorable joke would be the one with Obasanjo. That he himself tells about. In fact, he said I should expunge it from my book. Really? He said I should expunge it from my book. And he wrote the foreword for the book. Okay. And so it was the fact that people were saying that he was very stingy. Okay. And I did not know that much. And he didn't know that I was making as much money as I was making. Until the day he stumbled on Aldo Ogbe, the guy that was in charge of media at the time, the choppy guy, for him, and doing Okupe, and they were all planning an event, and then he saw this, so he stumbled on it and was looking at it, and he said, Alibaba, 1 million. Why? And they told him, he said, oh no, that is what he charges. He said, for real? Since 1999? That's what he's been charging and coming to this place and charging. So when we went to the event in the hall, in International Conference Center, as he walked in and I was recognizing him and all they changed from OAU to AU. And so they had a conference. As I was walking in, I was recognizing him, which was what I was working with Ike Nandagoba, one of our senior colleagues. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, and other visiting heads of state. Baba just looked up at me and said, Ole. And that was not that. So why I said it's memorable is that the other heads of state thought it was an African greeting, Nigerian greeting. So Ole. But you see, it's my classic. And Baba repeats it every time. So that has to be like.
Well, Alibaba, my director is already shouting in my ears. This is the first time we've gone as far as 3 minutes before the hour. But thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you. So many other industry issues to discuss with you, but that'll be some other time. Thank you so much. December 23 this year, DSS. You're gonna be here. All right. No,
and January 1st concert is also on the 1st.
Definitely. So, in fact, you don't like doing that, but you will do this year. All right, that's our show today. Thank you so much, Ali Baba, for being here. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your weekend. We should be going to the National Assembly any moment from now because there are one or two activities to be dealt with there. That's it. The event is not yet started, but as soon as activities are in full gear, we'll definitely take you there. For now, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I'm Ayo Makinde. Bye for now.
In the unwritten pages of extreme opulence lies a well-tailored art of contemporary living. Comes another breathtaking architectural masterpiece, a waterfront property masterfully created by a visionary team of world-renowned architects crowned with premium fittings. Leonardo is about to offend every iota of mediocrity with Fendi. The Leonardo now sells at a 25% price off. Forget every notion of luxury you've ever known. Own the Leonardo.
Exclusive breastfeeding is the practice of breastfeeding a baby from 1 hour of life, ideally, up to 6 months of life with purely breast milk.
The theme for the 2023 World Breastfeeding Week is Enabling Breastfeeding, Making a Difference for Working Parents.
The fact that it will take me less than a minute to get to the creche to either breastfeed my child or express the milk for her to take. Extremely helpful.
Breastfeeding is a foundation to good nutrition and the key to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I call on families, employers and policymakers to support mothers to achieve their breastfeeding goals. Let's come together to empower parents and create an enabling environment. Breastfeeding saves lives and money.
This message is sponsored by the Child Health Advocacy Initiative in collaboration with the First Lady of Lagos State and CEO, Medicaid CF Programs.